Warning, this podcast contains violence, sexuality, gore, and other horrible and disturbing things. Listener discretion is advised. Also, the hosts of this venture are ignorant dipshits, so please do not take anything they say as fact. And enjoy the show.
Now, are you sitting comfortably? Good. Then we'll begin.
Today we had 15 homicides and 63 violent crimes, as if that's the way it's supposed to be.
It is our basic human right to be fuck-up.
A second plane now has crashed into the other tower of the World Trade Center.
Putting chemicals in the water that turn the friggin' frogs gay.
The defendant shall be incarcerated for the rest of her natural life with no possibility of parole.
You are not machines. You are not cattle. You are men.
We were somewhere around Barstow, on the edge of the desert, when the drugs began to take hold.
Occultae Veritatis.
Hello, occultists, and welcome back to Occultae Veritatis podcast. My name is Leon Filger, along with
Sage Murray,
Ood Gallifrey,
Richard Bigley,
the soundboard demon,
and joining us in studio,
Kate Erickson,
Ellie B,
Don Kessler.
Today on OVPOD, we learn about Legacy Christian Academy, operated by Mile 2 Church. Yes, a private school operated by a Christian church in the center of Canada. Former students, employees, and other people connected to this academy have come out through the years reporting not only giving a poor education to those that attend, but of many abuses within. These stories didn't gain widespread attention until this year, 2022, when former students Kate Erickson and Coy Nolin filed a $25 million class action lawsuit pursuing 2 Mile Church for allowing these abuses to happen. We have one of the lead plaintiffs, Kate Erickson, here to tell her story. And Coy Nolin, the other lead plaintiff on the lawsuit, is also going to be popping into the episode from time to time. This is going to be a rough one, so we need some poison.
So, what's your poison?
The only coffee I've ever ran into that I disliked was that dollar store coffee with 1.5 times caffeine that had an aftertaste of bug spray.
Oh.
You know, again, 10 out of 10. Love coffee.
I like it. It's kind of sweet.
Oh, are we supposed to be drinking this?
I don't know. I got excited.
Should I just slurp right into the mic?
Oh, yeah.
He was busy boofing it.
Somebody loved slurping sounds, so here you go. Enjoy.
I'm excited for that. I just want like 30 seconds of that slurp, you know?
Oh, yeah.
Do we all want to slurp all at once?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Coffee's up. 3, 2, 1.
Good.
Oh, wrong tube.
Okay, so I'm rating this coffee. It's still too hot to drink, and I just burnt my tongue out of 3 Wizards of Oz.
Based.
Yeah. Based.
Based in Ozpil.
Yeah.
Not Dr. Oz. Not Dr. Oz. Just the wizard.
It's a little bitter.
Oh, really? It's like the sweetest coffee I've ever had.
It is quite sweet. I find is it a little watery?
No, I brewed it strong. There's no way it's watery. Did you add water to yours?
I'm a sacrilegious person.
But adding water to like scotch kind of helps bring out certain flavors in it. So I'm not going to critique you on that particular part. Is that the second thing of sugar you're putting in there?
You have like this much coffee.
Yeah, you've
like
got
an inch of coffee.
In like a coffee cup.
I'm not going to shame you on, is that more sugar?
I'm coffee shaming.
I'm coffee shaming now. Yeah, we're done.
I like a little coffee with my sugar.
Okay, has anyone else got ratings for this coffee before we continue?
I'm going to have to agree with your rating. This is a microwaved Pop-Tart out of 10 on the burned tongue scale.
I was going to say 3 exorcisms out of 4 biblically influenced science textbooks.
Oh, there we go.
Topical.
I can't judge people who dress up their coffee because life is depressing sometimes. If somebody wants to sweeten up their brew, I can't judge.
It's a burnt, stale, toasted marshmallow.
Probably because of all the sugar you put in it.
Oh, it's a solid 8 out of 10 for me. It's a little sweet.
Caffeine out of coffee.
What about?
Dozens of former students say they were assaulted and abused while attending Saskatoon's Legacy Christian Academy. They say they were subjected to exorcisms, solitary confinement, sexual abuse, and a severe form of corporal punishment known as paddling.
We have students who would wear 6 and 7 and 8 pairs of underwear to school each day because they thought they were going to get paddled. We have girls saying they were paddled so hard that they were bruised down to their knees.
It was encouraging paddling kids. There was no encouraging. It was, you will do this. Full stop.
It's not like just getting swatted with someone's hand. It's like a hardwood paddle that they had specially made. It would absolutely leave pretty intense bruising.
He made me bend over, and it was weird because most of the time we had to bend over pews or bend over onto a hard chair, but we were in a camp, adult counselor's office. So I actually bent on a cushy chair, and so it was a weird angle. I'm sad that I even have to say that out loud and stuff like that, but I was bent over at a weird angle, and he proceeded to spank me 3 times on my butt. And then we prayed after. That was one of the biggest things, though, is just whenever they spank us, they hold our hands and they pray with us, and it's out of love, and it's weird and creepy. It makes me sick that this person has gotten to a point where he already is at and thinks that it's okay.
I want to give a statement, and I want to get my story out there, and like everybody else, just stand up and talk of what happened to us, because it wasn't right.
It's disgusting, it's wrong, and it's evil. It's evil. A lot of it is behind the scenes and untalked about, and that's what I'm hoping I can tell with my story.
The alleged abuses are, of course, horrific. This church and school exhibits all the hallmarks of what we often think of as a cult. We've estimated there's probably in the range of 700 students or 800 students that during that time period have gone through that school. Of course, other members of the congregation as well. We don't know how many of those students will be coming forward to indicate that alleging that they've suffered any abuse.
And when I read these stories about brave former students that came forward to think that this was the experience that shaped young lives, and angry that these allegations, it appears, were brought to the minister only to be ignored.
We're very concerned for the children who attend that school, and that school is going to start up in a few weeks.
That if you have someone who is potential danger to vulnerable people, that you would prioritize a file like that, and charging an individual, if you have what it takes to charge them, in order to restrict further harm. I don't understand the process of why the police are waiting, why the Crown is waiting. I'm not actually sure, because there's been 0 updates from them.
There could be other people. There are other people named in the suit. Who knows where they are? They're not certified with the SBTRB. They're not regulated. So the Ministry of Education needs to do something to pay attention to how these schools are started, how they get these letters of eligibility, or how they're enforcing their regulations to make sure kids are safe.
When you're the Minister of Education and you have the power to actually do something to step in and protect people, being troubled isn't enough.
I would like to see the place closed personally, and that the people who are in charge are not able to have anything to do with education ever again.
I felt very powerless because there was a lot of adults that were involved in this that at no point stopped and said, hey, we've gone too far. So it was a very powerless feeling. It was very traumatic.
There was a lot that went on there. That was not okay, and it's taken a long time for people to speak up, so yeah. I mean, it was a cult. It was essentially a cult. It had all the markings of that.
A big part of me coming forward to begin with was the effects that I saw on my peers. And, for all of us coming forward, it's definitely enabled other people to come forward, and it's just long overdue.
Many of us struggle with this trauma every single day of our lives. Specifically during my high school years at Christian Center Academy,
the staff tried to physically and psychologically break me. Despite their best efforts, they were not successful. And that's why I'm able to stand here today. So thank you.
Kate, we've got some questions for you.
I bet you do.
Okay, so I want to start at the beginning of this. We'll start with the Genesis, if you will.
The Alpha and the Omega.
We're doing jokes? Oh, good. Oh.
So the subject of the episode is the former Christian Center Academy and former Christian Center Church. How old were you when you first got tangled up in all of this? And how did you get there in the first place?
So we ended up at Christian Center when I was 4 years old. My mom had been invited to the church by a coworker, but we had other family members that attended the church as well. It was around the time I was 4, and then shortly I was enrolled into the school in the fall, and I spent kindergarten to grade 12 going to the school, and I attended the church for those 12 years as well, till I left 2 weeks after graduation.
At what point did you know that this school wasn't like other schools? Or did you ever have the ability to compare it to mainstream schools and realize that, well, what they're teaching here is a little bit kooky?
When I was 10 years old, we moved to Kelowna, BC. My mom had married my stepdad and he lived out there. And we moved, and the church was very against us moving. But we did. And I attended a Christian school there, but it used public school curriculum and it had certified teachers. And it was a completely different experience. The teachers, the environment was based on learning, creativity. The teachers were all very nice. We had our one stuffy science teacher that was a little crusty, but other than that, everybody was really nice. And the principal, the dynamic there was so different from what I had experienced because everyone loved the principal. Like the principal, you'd see him walking down the hallway and kids would just run to him and be like, hi. And at my school, if we saw the principal or the director of our school, it would engage like anxiety and fear, and we would not want to interact with those people. So it just was a very different environment. And the students, even, my peers there were so kind to me. And they were always, asking like, oh, you're new, like what are you into? And what do you like? What kind of music do you like? And I didn't know how to answer any of those questions because everything, the music, we were told, this is, kind of approved church music. This is what everybody listens to. How we dress, there was a strict dress code. There was an expectation for dress code in church as well. So it just was a very different, very freeing experience. So I had a very positive experience. Then we moved back to Saskatchewan. When my mom married my stepdad, I gained a 6-year-old sister who I love to death. She lives in Winnipeg. This whole environment was so foreign to her. She'd been in the previous school in Kelowna. We weren't quite in Kelowna for a full year, just about a year. And when we moved back, the principal of the school, which was Lou Burnell, did not want to allow me back into the school. Basically, they wanted my mom to beg for us to be allowed to come back.
Right, because how dare she leave in the first place?
Exactly. And it was like you coming back was proof you should have never left. These people were isolated from their families when they left. Like the pastor would just go on absolute ragers from the pulpit on anybody who left. They would just eviscerate their character, just absolutely crap on them as a person, and then reiterate that, like, we will not be unequally yoked. If someone makes the poor choice because they're stupid to leave, like, you do not associate with them. So it just was so isolating for people who did try and leave. So they really developed this huge culture of fear. And even for myself, it took me several years, even after leaving, to not still be engaged in that fear. And that's why I did not live in Saskatoon for the majority of time after I left high school, because it just was, even just being on the north end and seeing that building was so triggering, or seeing somebody from the church. When I did originally leave, I had people from the church that saw me one was at Lawson Heights Mall and came up to me and was like, "You're going to hell. You've made poor choices. You're a disgrace to your family." And then I ran into people at Midtown Mall, and this is when I was living in Alberta and had come back to visit family. And same thing. It was like, you need to repent. You need to get your life straight with God. You're on a dangerous path. You're going to end up in hell. And that was the big fear. They controlled people through that fear and the fear of isolation and losing your family.
How old were you when you first started to realize it was bullshit?
Well, when we went to Kelowna.
Yeah.
Yeah, just because even being in a church there and a Christian school there and seeing the dynamic, seeing these people that were just so kind to each other, they loved each other, they were not hostile towards each other, and they were involved in their community from a perspective of not getting anything back, not getting any acknowledgement back. It was just like, that's more what aligned with my beliefs at the time than what I had experienced. And then when I came back, like, things had just even gotten worse from when I had left.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, it was about like 10, 11 in there. We go back to the school and it was very hard to reintegrate back or after being out and seeing, experiencing other things. I was immediately deemed as, she's changed. She was not little Miss Submissive anymore. So when I feel very strongly about something, it's going to take a lot for me. I can listen to other people's perspective, but to my core, I believe what I see in evidence in front of me. And they tried to psychologically break me because I was somebody who I wasn't buying into it. And I just continued to be who I was, and they just that was not okay. I guess it was more to the director was maybe losing his effect a little bit on me, where he'd bring me in for these bizarre interrogations where he would interrogate to try and get me to confess either something I'd done wrong so that he could punish me, or something another student did wrong so that he had the opportunity to punish them. And then possibly me, because if I admit something that I didn't come and tell them about, you were also punished for that.
Guilty by association.
Guilty by association was a phrase they used all the time. So then they started kind of pinning students up against me, where they would be like, kind of like, you will be elevated if you rat her out. And there was that dynamic, but it wasn't just me. That was a culture they created there where it was student versus student. So when you're busy just trying to not get ratted out by your peers for burning a CD that says Hillsongs on it, but it's actually
Backstreet Boys.
Something else. Like Rob Zombie. So, so you're fighting your peers almost, and then you're working the dynamic of fighting all these people in authority so a lot of people just broke and gave into it. And that's how they controlled people. And they had this system of gaslighting where even if you knew to your core that something was true, they would gaslight the crap out of you till you were questioning your own sanity, and you're like, but wait, maybe that did happen?
2 + 2 = 5. This is all very 1984.
Yes.
And this is all in the name of saving you.
Absolutely.
Like, this is how we love people, is we make sure that they are on the straight path.
Yes. And that was the biggest fear installed in parents, was that your child would end up in the world, and that deemed you as a not successful parent. Things just really were not the same when I came back. The first thing I did when I got back, because I've talked about publicly the sexual abuse that went on. First thing I did when I got back was I warned my peers about that predator in the church. And he would have been a high school student in the school at that time. Around the time he would have been like in grade 12 when I came back. So, initially when the stories came out, the first question people asked was, well, was there sexual abuse too? You've said emotional, psychological, physical. Was there sexual abuse? And I was like, yeah, but we're not ready to talk about it yet, because my story is linked with several other victims. So I was ready to talk, but making sure that everybody else is ready for that story to come out and to speak on it, I had to wait for some of those other individuals to be ready.
Caitlin Erickson says the memories are still clear in her mind. She attended Christian Center Academy in Saskatoon and the attached church for 13 years until 2005. And when she was a young girl, she says she was sexually abused by a Sunday school teacher there.
And you would have been how old?
6 or 7.
The teacher was Nathan Schultz. His parents were senior officials with the church. Erickson says when Schultz was 16 or 17, he took her to the equipment room in the school and made her touch his penis by telling her he had something for her in his pocket. Erickson says the incident has traumatized her for years.
The effects are something that a lot of us are going to be dealing with for the rest of our lives. And I've had, therapy to address this kind of thing, but this shouldn't have happened to begin with.
CBC News spoke to 2 other women who say Schultz sexually abused them too around the same time. They were between 4 and 7 years old. They say Schultz got them to take candy off his genitals with their hands. One says she also had to do that with her mouth. Some of these allegations are outlined in a $25 million proposed class action lawsuit, which claims sexual abuse was perpetrated and covered up by multiple people. School and church officials appear to have known of abuse allegations at least 3 times. Erickson says she had to apologize to Schultz's parents in a meeting with a top school official after she brought up allegations in 2003. And parents of one of the other victims say they told a senior church official about alleged abuse after a few years when their daughter told them. They say the official told them to keep quiet.
There was definitely a culture of secrecy. It was, a bit of a hierarchy where children were at the very bottom and we didn't have the ability to speak out at all.
On the psychological side of things, it was really trying to break me down as a person. I had convinced myself that I was a bad person and that I was not smart. And that was one of the things that I struggled with. And I still every once in a while have a slip up with it, but I've worked really hard, put in the work in therapy to work through some of this. And that whole concept of because I was a strong person, we have to break her down or she's going to influence other people. And that was a big part of the psychological abuse that happened to me. The more it went on, especially my high school years, I just became so desensitized as my way to cope. So they weren't getting the reaction out of me that they wanted. So then started the mind games. So if I didn't cry when I was spanked, which was like the ultimate disrespect to them, the director had made a comment, I wonder if your sister would have the same reaction.
Holy fuck.
And I am the oldest in my family. I have 2 sisters that I was raised with. One is 4 years younger than me. One is 11 years younger than me. And thank the spaghetti monster in the sky that
praise his newly avenged.
my sister was kicked out, and I think that really saved her. She struggled for a long time after, but then to me, it was not as big of an anxiety because she wasn't there anymore. And my sister is somebody who, had she been in a proper educational setting, she probably been, referred for a diagnosis, of a learning disability. But again, she was somebody who didn't come from this life originally. So it was very hard for her when she did move here. And the reason she was kicked out of the school is because our parents had separated and her and my mom did not have a good relationship. And she wanted to live with her dad. And her dad, is someone who struggled with mental health over the years. And he has had his own issues, but she wanted to go live with him. And because he was seen as like not obedient by the church. And I mean, he definitely was engaging in some harmful behaviors in our house. They were like, that's not acceptable. And so they kicked her out. And, you know, at the time it was very, very hard because my sister and I very, very close. But, you know, in hindsight now, it's like that was the best thing that could have happened other than us not attending that place. So, yeah, it was tough. And then my sister, you know, who's 11 years younger, she was just starting kindergarten and her personality is very different than mine. She's a very quiet kid. And, you know, they left her alone for the most part. So it was very tough because there was always that threat that you would be isolated from your family. And we had been, you know, kind of isolated from some family a bit. My mom had isolated us because that's what the church had taught. Family that didn't believe or, you know, question your kids, like what's going on there. You know, you get isolated from those people. So that was a huge, huge fear for me. And that is why I ended up not leaving when I was in grade 11, when I had the opportunity to leave, when things were really peaking, because I couldn't justify leaving my siblings because I knew the second I did, it was you'd be cut off from them because the church wouldn't allow that at all. And that's how they kept you in line, right? Was we're just going to rip the mat out from underneath you if you do not comply.
For some early proof of what Kate was talking about, there was a caller a few years ago that called into the John Gormley show, and he was talking about how his family was pressured to stay when they were leaving 3 Mile Church. And on that show, John Gormley also read a letter from the lead pastor of the church, Keith Johnson, to a family that was trying to leave the church.
This is Gormley on 650 CKOM.
This Christian Center Academy is an adjunct of the Saskatoon Christian Center. Okay, letter written by a senior pastor, Keith Johnson, to Kim Parr's family. Dear Kim, I will attempt to answer the concerns you expressed to me in your email and hopefully put everything in perspective. When your husband came in to meet with me and discussed his plan to pull the children out of CCA, and this, of course, means the Christian Center Academy, I appealed to him to reconsider his decision because I knew he wasn't counting the cost and wasn't seeing the whole picture. I pointed out to him that he was pulling his family out of a community that they'd lived in most of their life. I pointed out that he would be severing ties with both family members as well as church members, and the repercussions wouldn't be enjoyable or nice. He assured me he'd counted that cost, but had to get his children into a school that would better serve their academic needs. He pulled the plug. The rest is history. Consequently, that put your family into a different community, not only with students, but with many ex-Saskatoon Christian Center people who were disgruntled with leadership here at Saskatoon Christian Center. Thus, you were contaminated with their poison and bitterness, and now, unfortunately, share many of their perspectives. Your contact with some of the family members here at Saskatoon Christian Center revealed your newfound perspectives that put you in direct contradiction to their beliefs and lifestyles. So, whatever disconnect you begin to feel about the people at SCC and them not having warm fuzzies toward you anymore was really your own doing, not ours. Boy, that kind of speaks on its face, doesn't it? That's an ominous thing, and that's from this Pastor Keith Johnson. But so there's a lot of talk about, again, but I'm a big believer in choice and diversity. So if you sign up for certain Christian schools, you know what you're getting into. But the issue is one about control and power and this whole idea of social exclusion. Tyler, what do you think of what you're hearing about this school?
Well, John, I'll say this, that I was there for 24 years, from the time I was 1 until 25. So I went through the 12 years of Christian school and then 2 years of Bible college. And there's dozens of things I could say, but the one thing I do want to say is I chose to leave when I was 25, and it was a huge decision for me. I was afraid and nervous and scared, but I just couldn't put up with the way they treated people there. So when I finally decided to leave, I sent them an email, and from there on, I was not allowed back in the building or to attend any events there or see any of my friends. And I went back about a year and a half later to just to attend a service, and 2 ushers approached me before I could even get into the auditorium and told me that the pastor said that I had to leave. So I walked out the door, and I didn't cause a scene or anything, but they did threaten to call the police if I didn't leave. So my beef is a place that I went to for almost 25 years. It's a church that's supposed to reach out and love people and show God's love to people. They can't even treat one of their own with any kind of respect, and it's still something that boggles my mind.
I can tell in your voice. This still hurts.
Yeah, it does. It's taken me a few years to even just get over the way they treat you. But I think the main thing that bothers me is they cannot. It's us against you. If you're not with us, you are against us. And just because I don't go there anymore doesn't mean I don't like the people there. There's so many wonderful people there that I love and care about. But they turn it into this. If you're not for us, you're an enemy, and that can be heard on. Anytime you go to their church, you'll hear messages preached like that.
You've used the hashtag legacy of abuse on Twitter extensively. How old were you when you first saw what would be considered abuse in the school or the church?
Well, I would have been 6. Yeah, it was within a couple years of being there.
And what was going on then?
Well, just the, they refer to it as biblical discipline, but it was corporal punishment.
Which had been outlawed by the Supreme Court of Canada in 2004.
It was outlawed in 2004, but prior to that, there was very, very strict guidelines on how you could use it in schools. There was 4 specific guidelines by the province. You could not use an implement as of 89, and they've always used an implement. The punishment had to be immediate. So if something had happened 4 days prior, you couldn't corporally punish a kid for that. You couldn't bring a kid into the office and say, you're going to get corporally punished tomorrow for something you did today. Like, there was none of that, which they did all the time. You also had to be between the ages, and this was provincially under their child abuse regulations. You could only use corporal punishment from the ages of 2 to 12.
What?
So, and that was the provincial child abuse standards at the time. So they definitely, were spanking kids well into high school years. So they weren't following that as well. So in the 4th regulation around corporal punishment, when it was allowed, was that the punishment had to fit the severity of what was done. So when you're, having kids that have learning disabilities and they're being corporally punished and spanked and paddled for not being academically where the rest of their peers are, that is severe, severe damaging abuse. When you look at what the education system deems as, a severe offense, which would be causing physical harm to somebody or extensive property damage, like those were kind of the 2 things at the time where it was like seen okay that you could still spank a kid within those 4 regulations. So from day 1 of me attending the school, they didn't follow any of those regulations.
So like a kid has dyslexia and is not keeping up on reading units as well as the other kids. That would be something that kid could potentially be corporally punished for.
Yes.
So
Jesus.
Richard Bigley and I both have dysgraphia. So it's a learning disability where like our writing is atrocious, like grade 3 writing. Is that the sort of thing that we could have been reprimanded for, like not writing neat enough?
Absolutely. And a huge core of the ACE curriculum is learning cursive and writing cursive perfectly. We had to have each letter perfect. Like I remember doing over and over and over. And I'm somebody who has ADHD and I wasn't medicated. I should have been medicated from a very young age, but wasn't. And didn't, become medicated till I was in university. And I remember one of my very earliest memories of being in kindergarten is my teacher getting so angry, like viscerally angry with me because I would not sit down at circle time. And I remember just like walking behind and just like pacing and her just getting like red in the face and angry.
Yeah. What psychological science is starting to show or has shown that like positive reinforcement is a much more effective and beneficial tool, especially in things like ADHD.
Some of the psychological studies I've found show that corporal punishment and physical punishment don't work, period. Like, children on average will get more defiant over time if physical punishment is used. So not only are you traumatizing the child, it just plain doesn't work.
An excerpt from the statement of claim. Under tortuous conduct, students and minor adherents and congregants of the church were physically struck by the individual defendants, either by hand or with a wooden paddle, as a disciplinary response to, among other things, whispering during church service or class, talking back to teachers, teachers' aides, school administrators, church elder, pastors, and other employees, agents, and representatives of Mile 2 Church Incorporated, showing disrespect to teachers, teachers' aides, school administrators, church elders, pastors, and other employees, agents, and representatives of Mile 2 Church Incorporated, disobeying directions of teachers, and the rest. Refusing to provide satisfactory answers to inquiries by employees, agents, and representatives of Mile 2 Church Incorporated, whether or not the member of the plaintiff class knew the answer, and whether or not it would be truthful to provide the answer. Cheating or otherwise being dishonest, particularly to teachers and the rest. Being caught within 6 inches of a student who is of the opposite sex. Telling jokes deemed inappropriate by the employees of that their church. For not crying during the administration of corporal punishment. For wearing padding around the area of the buttocks while being subject to corporal punishment. For talking negatively about the school or church. Socializing with people who were not students at the school or members of the church, not completing homework, not telling church and school leadership when purported wrongdoings was done by other students, on the mere allegation of any of the foregoing. This has been a list of all the shit that would get you hit, allegedly, in this fucked up church.
They weren't following guidelines or regulations surrounding corporal punishment. Was it more of a culture of silence that kept people from reporting things? Or was it like, even if it was reported, it would fall on deaf ears who would enforce that law? Or was it sort of both?
It was a little bit of a combination of both. You know, as this has all become public, you know, I've heard several stories from people who have, you know, did go to social services in the past. They did report things to the Ministry of Education, and it did really fall on deaf ears. There was also people that were involved in this organization that were either in government or had ties to government. So that, you know, was a real problem. But part of the brainwashing was making people believe that what they were doing was legal. And there was such an isolation there that people would not reach out to question that, you know, and obviously at that time we didn't have, you know, the internet and every, you know, easier, you know, accessible information. But there, I mean, myself, I called social services when I was in high school 3 to 5 times in there. I would walk across to the library. They used to have a public phone there, and I would call social services. They would, you know, I'd tell them what was going on, and they were like, well, you know, you need to ask your parents to take you out of the school. And like, that was kind of the comments they'd make. And they'd be like, okay, yeah, we'll document it. I also called Saskatoon police, and they said, you need to come down and give a statement. And I was like, I can't come down and give a statement. Like, I'm in high school. If somebody sees me going to the police station, and like, I was like, how do I get there? Like, I'd have to walk, and it would take me like 4 hours to walk where I'm, you know, I just was like, I can't come down. I can't put my name on a piece of paper saying, you know, that this is going on. And then at one point when I was in grade 11, I reached out to some family and I had said, I can't do this anymore. Like, I need to leave this place. And so I told them some of the things that were going on, and they got me in touch with a few local media, and they said, you need to tell them what's going on and they can try and do a story. So I had spoken with 2 different people from the media at that point, and they said that they had tried to put pieces out previously and had always been shut down by legal. And so they would reach out to the church for a statement. The church's lawyer would shut them down immediately. You know, there's a few articles from the 80s, a couple from the early 90s, really well done articles. And, you know, people just forgot. Like, those articles would come out, and then a year later, people would forget those articles came out. When people would bring it up and say, oh, you know, what about buying the pastor a house? Oh, well, they blew it out of proportion. Like, it always seemed to kind of die out. And when I decided to come forward and It was like, this cannot be like how it was in the 90s and the 80s when very, very brave people spoke out and tried to expose what was going on. And they just were not successful in doing that.
Were you personally corporally punished?
Yes, lots.
How many times would you estimate?
I couldn't give you a specific amount because I was there for 12 years and it was just part of life there. So I can give you specific incidents that I remember surrounding my best friend who was, he is a gay man living, openly now living and has for many years. And he was also my neighbor. So we lived side by side, but we had 2 people from Christian Center that lived on our street. One was a teacher and the other one was a coach. They would closely monitor us. They'd see us going to each other's houses or playing together. And I had siblings, he had siblings. So we were always together. I consider them family. And they couldn't decide whether Coy and I were in a relationship and being inappropriate, in their eyes, because you were not allowed to date in high school, like in school, period. There was no dating. The only way you could date is if you had permission from the pastor to date. And if it was like an approved relationship. So they couldn't figure out if we were engaged in a relationship or if Coy was gay. So it was this like back and forth of either you're going to admit to me that you guys are being inappropriate or you're going to admit to me that he's gay.
Because
and
boys and girls can't be friends.
Absolutely not. No. Yeah.
And either way, that's a paddling.
Yeah. Again, the director would bring me in for these bizarre interrogations where he would sit there and just say, one time it was, you're going to tell me what type of magazines are in Coy's room. And I'm like, what are you talking about? Like, he's a huge comic book nerd. He loves, whatever. He's going to be so mad if I misquote him. It's one of the superhero, one of them. I don't want to say if it's DC or Marvel. He's obsessed with one of them because he'll get so mad if I'm wrong.
Let's just double down.
Oh, God.
It was DC.
I want to say, okay, what is X-Men?
Marvel.
It's Marvel. He's obsessed with X-Men.
Either way, it'd be heretical text in their eyes, would it not?
Yeah. Oh, totally. So, and, but that wasn't, I guess, what they were referring to. I guess he had a pornography magazine. I don't even know if it was pornography or if it was like
the Sears catalog.
Yeah, it could have been. So the director kept bringing me. He brought me in like 3 times for like asking me this, and then one time he brought me in. He changed the line of questioning from like, you're lying, you're gonna tell me what magazines are there, to you've been in his bedroom. And then it was like on that, and I'm like, well, yeah, like we're friends. I've been in every area of his house.
So at this point in the episode, Kate just told us about this magazine that was found in your room. But before we get into that, would you like to introduce yourself?
Hi. My name is Coy Nolin.
Mhm.
I'm one of the 2 lead representative complainants of the current lawsuit we have against certain people.
You never figure that it's going to be you leading that kind of charge, eh?
Well, it was honestly really funny too, because like Caitlin and I have been best friends for, oh my God, I do this for my passport, 24 years.
Yeah.
We did take some time apart when I still lived in Canmore and Banff and stuff, and then she, started having her kids and everything, and they were kind of separate. We were always still like kind of being acquaintances and stuff, but then within the last like 2.5 years, we really reconnected, and all of a sudden now it's now we're doing this. So
Yeah, kind of a trial by fire for both of you, eh?
it's been interesting, that's for sure. So
Kate just told us about an incident where the church, the school, they were convinced, well, there's a boy and there's a girl and they're friends, and they can't just be friends, right? Either they have to be having sex or somebody's gay or something. And she told us that you guys were both interrogated about that. Would you like to tell what happened from your end of the story on that one?
well, it didn't also help that we lived in the same duplex. So already were best friends before that, and all of a sudden her and I shared, a building. Obviously not same rooms and everything, but we were super close. We were able to, it was same with like what was walking home from school together all the time and everything like that. Plus we would hang outside of school and church and everything. And they were like convinced that her and I were in a relationship. Actually, the one elder actually had a conversation with me, and he was just like, you have to end your friendship with Caitlin, or and everything like that. Like, and you have to be the one to tell her, you know, so it's coming from you, you know, because you're the man, you're the man of God and everything. And so it was, and I tried to have this conversation with her. I really don't feel like it went well, but it was so, yeah, no, I honestly don't know, like, if they thought that we were like sleeping together, or, you know what, they always tried to assume the worst though. So they probably did, you know, but it was so strange that would have been our grade 11 year. Sorry, our grade 10 year. They were like convinced that something was going on between the two of us. And then over the course of the summer and coming back fresh into grade 11, my hell year there, my last year there, all of a sudden it switched from, you know, that it was like, oh, are Caitlin and Coy doing something together, to that's what started the witch hunt for figuring out that I was a big old homo.
From the impression I got, it seems like they very much wanted to intervene and change who you were.
Oh yeah, it's
oh yeah.
It was like little things too, like I don't know, they're like, what movies does he watch, what TV shows does he have cable, you know, and everything like that. Like, because we were so close to, like, in the north end, like literally I think it was like a 10 to 15 minute walk from that church school where we lived, and there was so many people that also went to the church and school in that area. I think there was like 4 people that actually lived on the same block as us that were like in authority figures there. So like I would not like to assume, but I know that we were being surveillanced.
And it seems like the environment that was built around the school and church, people were rewarded for surveilling and telling on people.
As more and more people are coming forward, some of them are telling us their side of things as well. And then we're finding out that there was a reward system basically put into place for them to basically spy on certain people. And they came back with, you know, juicy gossip, basically. And it was, you know, they were rewarded for it. But like, wasn't even just the kids that were being watched. Like, my brother was removed the year before, and he went to actually live with our grandparents, and they're like adults, and yet there's people watching them that they knew that, because we weren't allowed to have contact with him because he was excommunicated, and we would have gotten into trouble if we were found communicating with him, because he was a bad influence, even though I'm the older brother, you know.
Yeah.
And somehow they found out that I was getting snuck over to my grandparents' house to go and spend some time with my brother. So they were watching the adults too. It was super weird. Inappropriate.
You described, as you got older, it changed from them thinking that you and Kate were involved with each other to being a witch hunt for your homosexuality. Could you describe kind of what that process was like? Like, what measures did they take to do that?
Like, I was brought into the office sometimes, and they would just be like basically touching base with me. Like, we definitely knew that they were watching very intently because of the year before when my brother got removed. I'm sure you know the pirate term, like when someone gives you the black spot, you know, you're kind of doomed and stuff. Like, our family was doomed because as soon as that happened, like, our entire family was just like put on like basically a no-fly list. Like, you're fucked. So, and it was like constant. And it also didn't help that they always like called us like rebellious or, you know, needing God and stuff. And you go from one weird extreme like that where you're basically thinking that you're like a demon. And when they do find out that you were having relations with another guy, you know, you get exorcised for your gay demons and then like punished for it, like with scriptural discipline. That was basically the end. That's what it led up to. Because like they're always like being, you know, there's something here, you know, Coy's up to something. And then someone actually came forward, and I was in shock. Like I was just like, oh, my entire world is literally collapsing right now. Like, because this basically was the building that I was in for like basically 7 days a week for oh my God, like 8 years, you know. So these are people that I thought I was going to be graduating high school with, you know. These were my friends, you know, people I was on the basketball team with, everything, you know. And yeah, your entire world comes crashing down. I had family that went there, so all of a sudden I was like, oh my God, what happened to my brother is going to happen to me, except what I was doing was even worse, you know, in their minds, kind of situation. And yeah, it came to a big head, and I didn't know what they knew because like the guy, the director of the school, he used this reference all the time. It was, all right, you filled the glass this much. I was like, but I feel like you need to fill that glass all the way, and you haven't told me everything. And he just keeps saying that over and over again. And finally I broke down. I didn't know what he knew, and I think I felt like I told him too much. Looking back now, because yeah, but there was stuff that I got in trouble for that I had nothing to do with. Like I was kind of just like, I was the gay scapegoat. You know, I kind of was like the worst of the problem. So, you know, if we get rid of that, let's put all the blame on him for that. But I felt bad too, because I found out afterwards, like three of my closest friends were, you know, basically like interrogated every day after I was gone. Basically like, are you still talking to Coy? Or if you talk to Coy, you know, we're gonna, you know, it was, yeah, no, I felt bad because they got a lot of shit, you know, during, and then they got a lot of shit afterwards that I felt like I caused, but at the same time, it wasn't really, you know, something to be blamed for. But yeah, no, even in our schoolwork, besides the fact that they would actually talk about, you know, how masturbation, oh, you're going to hell, like specifically as in sermons, like in the church, and especially like in teen class, when probably would have been like very, very prevalent. You know, homosexuality is a sin, you know, it's an abomination, you're going to hell. And they'd always like make it like one of the bigger cardinal sins, you know, that's the one that you're never going to be able to be forgiven for. So like having that preached at you when you're growing up and stuff, like it's still definitely in the back of my head. Like I just have to remind myself, like, no, I'm good. I'm all right. Like I'm okay. Like, but yeah, schoolwork and stuff, like in the ACE curriculum, it's a biology PACE 1107. It's a homosexuality. Homosexual activity is another of man's corruptions of God's plan. The prefix homo comes from a Greek word that means same. Homosexuals engage in sexual activity with their own sex. The Bible records that God destroyed the cities of Sodom and Gomorrah because of homosexual activity. Some people mistakenly believe that an individual is born homosexual and his attraction to those of the same sex is normal. Because extensive tests have shown that there is no biological difference between homosexuals and others, these tests seem to prove that homosexuality is a learned behavior. The Bible teaches that homosexuality is a sin. In Old Testament times, God commanded that homosexuals be put to death. Since God never commanded death for normal or acceptable actions, it is as unreasonable to say that homosexuality is normal as it is to say that murder or stealing is normal.
Even when nobody was doing anything, the director was going out of his way to find fault with us, so he had excuse to corporally punish us. And I firmly believe that as an adult and someone who has some education, looking back at the situation now, the director that was in high school, there is no possible way that he did not get off on this.
Yeah, definitely
There's
sounds
no
like
possible way. Because when you're going out of your way to do that, and even the methodology of how he would do things, I'm also someone that journaled so extensively. So that was also great through this whole legal process. And I was like, I do actually have specific dates for certain things. And other students too that journaled. So when you put all that together, you know, it's
get a pretty robust.
Yeah, all of our stories corroborate each other. So I can give you some specific examples. There was one incident, this was before I'd moved to Kelowna, so I would have been under 10, where one of the boys stole my lunch. I was went at the lunch table, put my lunch down. He grabbed it and ran into the boys' bathroom. So I chased him and I went right into the boys' bathroom, ripped it out of his hand and got out. And I was sent to the principal's office. And it was... The boy didn't get in trouble for taking my stuff and running to the bathroom, but I was corporally punished because I was inappropriate going into the men's bathroom.
What?
So yeah, there was, you know, things like that. If you would like as well, I can provide a copy of the child training manual. Did I provide that to you yet?
No, not yet.
Okay,
but I would love to.
I can send you that because that is a document you might want to link as well. And the child training manual,
which was
really
written by Keith Johnson.
So the father of the current pastor. They wanted the parents to use it. They said in the manual that this is what we do in the school. And there's some really, really damaging stuff there around kids who have any type of diagnoses. And it talks specifically about ADHD and hyperactivity. In the one page, basically making fun of doctors, scoffing at doctors, because that was a big thing they did. You were considered weak if you consulted a doctor or needed to be on medication. That was kind of seen as weak. There's some really heinous stuff in there just saying, if you use this, if you're spanking your child constantly, hyperactivity won't be a problem for much longer. And, as an adult, when I reread the child training manual, it made me want to puke. It just was so awful. And to have those thoughts and ideology and then put it into a book and then distribute that book.
And have people believe that book?
And create a whole indoctrination on that book and then use it in the school. It speaks to the length this guy and the church wanted to go to just have this used all the time. When I read through that, going through my mind, it was just like, walk yourself to jail. Just walk yourself to jail. Things in there. How do you even defend any of this?
Here we have some excerpts from the training manual. They all have a bit of a header, and each of them has a little space for the parent to write in the correct answer. I will try as best as I can to audibly make air quotes. Raising a child is not training. To raise something is to grow it. To raise a child would only consist of feeding, clothing, and protecting him from destruction until he reaches physical maturity. Sadly, it is true that most parents today are merely raising their children, but that still does not constitute child training as God intended. If you desire for your child to become obedient and willing to accept God's standard as his own, you will have to utilize the process that God designed to obtain those results. Parents do not owe their child an explanation for their instruction. Controlling a child. When a child's outside influences, playmates, school, church, and entertainment are controlled, he is free to learn the standards for acceptable conduct from his parents, without any contrary information to confuse him. An excerpt on medication and mental health. Remember, self-control comes when the will takes over and decides what a person does. Have you ever wondered why there are so many hyperactive children today? Parents are failing to develop self-control in their children. Children simply cannot control their senses. And our bright medical profession says we remedy their hyperactivity by giving them medication. When I was a child, I often wanted to run through the house, jump on the furniture, yell at my parents, and be ill-mannered at the table. But my dad hadn't been trained in the handling of hyperactive children. At such times, how I would have loved some medication, but Dad didn't know he was supposed to give me medication. Instead, he gave me a spanking. I wasn't nearly as hyperactive after he got through with me. We apply the same standards of response to hyperactive children in our Christian school. On the Bible versus psychologists. We have just produced an entire generation of young people raised mostly on the deadly theories of Dr. Spock. Spock and other child psychologists who were influenced by the devil advocated that, quote, spanking a child may leave him with inner rebellion. They taught us that a child's desires should not be thwarted, end quote. In other words, if little Junior wants to take a paintbrush and redecorate his walls, let him do it. He's just expressing himself. Christian friends, listen closely. The Bible is not a theory. You can raise your child according to the Word and experience Bible results. Quote, they'll turn out right. Some practical spanking tips. Many parents say, quote, I love my child too much to spank them, end quote. Isn't that strange? The Bible says exactly the opposite. If you really love your children, you will spank them when they do wrong, and you'll start early in life. This scripture implies that there's a point to a child's life when a spanking won't accomplish much. Start early, and for your child's sake, don't let them manipulate you with an artificial display of emotion. You may be tempted to think that you are doing them emotional harm by spanking them. Don't believe it. This is where moms need help. On the spanking ritual. Spanking should be a ritual. A ritual is any practice regularly repeated in a set, precise manner. The ritual should be calm and deliberate, lasting at least 10 or 15 minutes. In the long run, you'll save time by doing this. It should be a ritual dreaded by the child. Dread means to anticipate pain and trouble. The order of the ritual should be as follows. 1. Somewhere in private, talk sternly and deliberately, without a display of temper, and let him know exactly what he has done wrong. 2. Require him to state to you what he has done wrong, so that the wrong is clearly recognized. An additional little note, to learn responsibility for his actions. 3. Ask him what the punishment is. 4. Explain that as God's representative, you are obeying God in administering discipline. 5. Read Ephesians chapter 6, verses 1 to 4. If he is able, have him read it. That passage is, Children, obey your parents in the Lord, for this is right. Honor your father and mother, which is the first commandment with a promise, so that it may go well with you, and that you may enjoy long life on the earth. Fathers, do not exasperate your children. Instead, bring them up in the training and instruction of the Lord. Also, explain that you are disciplining him, because you want the best for him, because you love him. Proverbs 13:24. Whoever spares the rod hates their children, but the one who loves their children is careful to discipline them. Have him bend over and apply the paddle firmly. Don't permit any wiggling around or jumping around. Don't allow any pre-discipline howling and sniveling. Don't let his crying and begging diminish the degree of severity of the punishment.
Another wrinkle in this story. The man who wrote the book the demon just read is missing somewhere in the States. His son is still running the church, but Keith Johnson himself cannot be tracked down.
Everybody's assistance with something. If you read this CBC article this morning, we're having a bit of a hard time tracking down the ex-lead pastor of the school and church I went to and the creator of the child abuse manual. This thing, Keith Johnson. CBC put out an article this morning just giving some details on how much effort has been put in to track this man down, and he's hiding and at the assistance of family members in the United States.
Now tied to Tulsa, Oklahoma, where numerous attempts to serve Johnson have been unsuccessful. The first, according to Canadian court documents, in August at a home where the process server says he spoke to Johnson's son-in-law.
Could he tell me where I could find Mr. Johnson? And he said, well, he's around. And I said, around where? Somewhere around Tulsa.
We went to the same home and also didn't find Keith Johnson.
No one answered, knocked twice. But as you can see, there's two different vehicles here. So not sure if anyone's home or not, but no one came to the door.
The process server says he then went to Church on the Move.
I talked to a couple of individuals whose name I don't remember. They identified themselves as pastors. And they all concluded that they had someone by that name who was a parishioner, if you will. They lived in Claremore. And we kind of ruled that person out. So I left there not knowing, to this day, really don't know what the affiliation is.
Court of King's Bench Justice Grant Curry agreed that Johnson has been evading service. Curry ordered Johnson's son-in-law to serve the pastor with papers.
But when we attempted to serve that order and the claim on the son-in-law, he told our process server to get off his property, don't come back, if he does, it'll be trespassing.
We were never really allowed to ask him questions.
A former student, who is also Johnson's granddaughter, says she's not surprised by Johnson's actions.
honestly think a lot of it's just his ego. Like, he just has a very big inflated ego, and I don't think he could ever come to the point where he would actually like admit any wrongdoing.
If the relative doesn't give Johnson the papers, or if Johnson fails to respond to the lawsuit, it could proceed without him and he would be left without a defense. Johnson was unable to be reached by CBC News by phone, email, or other means.
Process server had been to Church on the Move in August. He'd been there quite a few times. He talked to various pastors, said he was looking for Keith, what was going on. This is the response from Church on the Move.
We were told the TikTok video was what brought the allegations to their attention. The church's written response: we are surprised by the TikTok video connecting one of our pastors to law enforcement's challenge in serving lawsuit documents to Mr. Johnson. While one of our pastors is related to Mr. Johnson, we are not connected to him, nor are we sheltering him in any way.
The man who started Church on the Move is Willie George, is Keith/William Johnson's uncle. The current pastor would be Keith's great nephew, I guess. But somehow when the process server was showing them all pictures, they've never heard of him. How bizarre. Yeah, not really. Pretty on brand. But then they slipped up and lied too, saying that this is the first they're hearing about this, when the process server has it on court record that he was at Church on the Move in August several different times, talked to several different pastors, showed them pictures of Keith/William Johnson. So, oopsie.
What has happened in American education is nothing less than a disaster of enormous proportion.
In my estimation, the public schools today are in a deplorable state.
I believe that the educational system today has betrayed the trust of our parents by removing the Bible and prayer from the school. In 1962, when that happened, the heart was taken out of education.
Young people are the future of this country. If we don't redeem a generation of young people and bring them back, this nation doesn't have a future.
Accelerated Christian Education is a Bible-based K-12 and college curriculum that's been used by pastors, supervisors, and homeschool parents for more than 50 years in 145 countries around the globe. ACE's academic curriculum is broken down into bite-sized, colorful workbooks called PACES, which are carefully designed to develop thinking skills and create mastery learning. PACES are full of innovative learning activities, godly character-building lessons, and Bible verses. ACE is more than just a curriculum. It's a Bible-based program dedicated to reaching the world for Christ, one child at a time.
Schools are supposed to prepare a child for what comes next. Prepare them for doing math and reading and stuff like that, and learning facts about the world, but the quality of the education was also poor, I understand.
To paint a picture here for people, you're sitting in a cubicle. You're not sitting in an open classroom. So you're sitting in a cubicle that's maybe 2 to 3 feet, maybe, and you have dividers. So you're looking at the wall in front of you, which is like 2 feet in front of you, and you have dividers. You're not allowed to turn around in your chair. You're not allowed to talk to the person next to you. You're not allowed to, you have to even get out of your chair. You have to have permission to get up and out of your chair. So it's very long hours of sitting there in this cubicle. You're only getting up to score. So we had to mark our own work as well. So they had a thing called the scoring station. You would go up to the scoring station, take out the scoring key, it was called, and then you would match your work with the scoring key, and you would have to go through and mark it if you got it wrong.
What?
So we were in a self-taught and self-marked system. So it was a very bizarre system of learning, and all of it was based on memorization. There was no open discussion or taking, an option to what do you want to write about. In grade 12, one of the essays we had to, they said, here's your options of 4 things you can write from. One was like, how close is your relationship with God, and what are you going to do to improve your relationship with God. One of the other things was how much do you love your pastor? And like, this is a grade 12 essay like that you're supposed to be writing. So I have a little bin of things that I've kept from over the years of attending this school. And there's been moments where I've thought about having a burning party. And thankfully, with everything that's going on now, I kept this bin of things. I had rough notes on research I did for another English assignment where it said, talk about something that you're passionate about. And of course, they wanted us to talk about God. I decided to write on the harms of corporal punishment. Yeah. And I still have the rough notes, and I have the piece of paper where the teacher, who is still the current English teacher at that school, may I add, and she wrote 0% on it and wrote, write something truthful. They use two different types of curriculum. ACE, Accelerated Christian Education, comes from Pensacola, Florida. And then they used SAKES, which is a curriculum that they created themselves, which they take the information from Bob Jones University textbooks, which are banned in several states just due to their inaccuracies.
From the Bob Jones University, regardless of the route you take, you will have a solid foundation at the molecular, cellular, and organismal levels.
That's nice.
Talking about their biology. I don't know that organismal is a word, but hey, good job.
That sounds like they pulled it directly out of their ass.
It does. It does sound like a word I might make up.
They call it BJU.
The type of learning style was solely based on memorization. There was no cumulative tests to make sure that you're grasping and actually understanding the information. It was all just memorization. As far as the quality of the education, it doesn't curate any sort of discussion. It doesn't teach kids how to critically think. It tells them and demands of them what to think and how their ideology should be and their outlook on the world. And that ACE curriculum is very Trump-like, very American. And, for an example, our premier this past week has said no to having an anti-hate resource in the province that is a resource for teachers to identify if their students are in jeopardy of joining some sort of crazy cult or hate group. And the province has said, no, we're not doing that. I mean, probably because it's a federally run thing. But the excuse that Premier Scott Moe gave was that there's not enough Saskatchewan content and the content is biased.
Well, the Saskatchewan content is quite
damning.
Well, it is damning. Like it really talks about the shitty racism in our province.
Yeah, it addresses Starlight Tours and talks
Starlight,
about
Colton Bouchy. We did an episode on that as well.
Racism.
And it's just a whole system designed to mow over people. And the materials kind of speaks to that, and they kind of talk about how these systems in place, are affected. And like you said, Scott Moe said, no, that's we're not going to teach that.
Sorry, I love the double entendre of mow over people.
Yeah, mow over people. Well, there was excerpts from textbooks that Accelerated Christian education where it goes into role of women in the household and role of women in society.
Yeah.
And your dress is a little too long, or a little too short. Maybe we should go out and go shopping and find you, a new dress that's longer because you're getting too big for that one.
Yeah.
Things like that,
Yeah, it was full of misogyny.
So for a lot of today's episode, when I say I'm quoting from ACE materials, Accelerated Christian Education materials, I'm mostly stealing, with permission, a lot of quotes from a thesis written by Jenna Scaramanga titled Systems of Indoctrination, Accelerated Christian Education in England. It's the same ACE as is used in the States and in Canada. There was a lot of material to go over. It's almost like there's an entire curriculum of it. But Jenna in her thesis has done the hard work to find a lot of the quotes and concepts I'm going to be mentioning in this episode. So check out her full thesis. A link will be in bio, or look up the name. It's also available free online. But here are some ACE texts used in ACE schools, used to push sexism and reinforce gender roles, just as Kate had mentioned. Indoctrination into gender roles begins in ACE's preschool curriculum. A lesson plan for nursery students instructs supervisors to discuss daddy's roles, such as protector, provider, leader, and hero, and they contrast it against mama's roles, such as helper, cook, cleaner, dishwasher, and person who does the laundry. They also discuss daddy's tools, such as screwdriver, hammer, and most important of all, the Bible. And they contrast it against mama's tools, such as mixing bowls, spoons, cleaning products, and, most importantly, the Bible. An example from an early elementary ACE activity book included a choose the correct sentence puzzle on the roles of women in marriage. So, play along. Let's choose the right sentence according to ACE education. Wives will be sorry to obey their husbands. Wives will be sad to obey their husbands. Or wives will be happy to obey their husbands. ACE thinks the third. Pick the correct sentence once again. Dogs shall obey their husbands. Cats shall obey their husbands, or wives shall obey their husbands. The correct answer, again, is the third one. An example from an ACE social studies course. God designed women's first ministry to be in the home. Often, however, God does call a woman to a ministry outside the home when she can still be the right kind of supporter to her husband in caring for family needs. A woman's role is in the home, except for when she can leave the home to support her husband. Here's a quote from the vice president of ACE at the time, Ronald Johnson. Girls who perform as athletes or cheerleaders in the presence of males soon lose their inhibitions. They become calloused about immodesty. Their sense of purity is weakened. Boys who watch females during aggressive or athletic cheering activity find their thoughts drifting from interest in the game to interest in the girls. Even the purest boy cannot for long cast his eyes upon physically attractive girls without first experiencing fleeting or lingering thoughts not directly related to sports taking place. That is why Ronald did not believe that girls should be allowed to play sports or cheerlead in ACE schools. And as the students started dating, efforts were made to reinforce the rigid gender roles of the church in there as well. Educational materials discouraged quote-unquote dating and instead encouraged courting. A quote from ACE materials. Courtship is a relationship between a man and a woman in which they seek to determine if it is God's will for them to marry each other. Under the protection, guidance, and blessing of parents or mentors, the couple concentrates on developing a deep friendship that could lead to marriage as they discern their readiness for marriage and God's timing for their marriage. So you see how the indoctrination builds upon itself towards educating young men and young women their roles are in this very binary and rigid indoctrination structure.
There's also a lot in the ACE curriculum where they are very pro-colonization. It's, there's like classism in there too. Like it's so archaic and outdated and not aligned with society today, how society should be.
This school received public funding, I believe, as well, like taxpayer-funded, government-funded.
Starting in 2012.
Support. In 2012, okay.
Yeah.
Great. I have helped pay for this school.
Yeah, taxpayers.
Ridiculous.
Quote from an ACE curriculum. Although apartheid appears to allow the unfair treatment of blacks, the system has worked very well in South Africa. Although white businessmen and developers are guilty of some unfair treatment of blacks, they turned South Africa into a modern, industrialized nation, which the poor, uneducated blacks couldn't have accomplished in several more decades.
It has not worked well in South Africa. South Africa's not well.
If more blacks were suddenly given control of the nation, its economy and business, as Mandela wished, they could have destroyed what they had waited and worked so hard for.
When I hear they justify colonialism, is it some of the, like, old school, like, we came over to the New World and we brought them Jesus and civility and saved them from their primitive little lives, like that kind of bullshit?
Yes.
Oh, jeez.
And there's also like several excerpts in there too about people who are missionaries and talking about how that's saving these people and, giving them Jesus and they don't, they're primitive. And yeah, it's just disgusting, all of it.
Here is some quotes from Accelerated Christian Education justifying colonialism by the British Empire. We cannot study history without acknowledging that God is the author and finisher of all history. It is His story. We see God intervening directly in human affairs from the beginning. The flood, the Tower of Babel, the call of Abram, and so on. No human authority or government is in power without His permission. As Romans 13:1 says, there is no power but of God. The powers that be are ordained of God. God also works through principles which He demonstrates over the course of time. For example, the principle from Proverbs 14:34, righteousness exalteth a nation, but sin is a reproach to any people, has been worked out in the history of several great nations and empires across the world. So to summarize so far, this text is teaching grade school students that colonialism is one of the ways in which God enacts His will upon the world. Because there is no way to get away from sin, so somebody has to be the tool of God, going around the world batting sinners on the head. Continuing reading. Queen Victoria's exemplary virtue and longevity contributed much to the stability and high moral tone of the Victorian age. Britain's position as a dynamo of industrial power, a showcase of material prosperity, a fearsome military threat to all would-be challengers, and a paradigm of democratic reform. Now, at the zenith of all her history, the Christian faith of the Britons, the very founding of British society, culture, and civilization was under serious attack. For the past 30 years, it has been fashionable with popular historians and journalists to write off the empire as repressive and negative in the subjugation of peoples and nations. The very words imperialist and imperialism have come to mean all that is horrible about the suppression of one's race and people by another. However, there is no doubt that the British Empire has brought by many benefits to the modern world. Both first the British Empire from 1600 to 1800 and the second 1800 to 1900 contributed very significantly to the spread of Western European culture, values, and beliefs throughout the world. Most importantly, British missionaries, like the apostles from the 1st century, used the British Empire to spread the gospel to nations that may have not otherwise heard the glad tidings of salvation. It is true that there are a number of disreputable events in the history of the British Empire, including 3 centuries of slave trading, the Opium Wars, and the exploitation of naive natives. However, on balance, the British Empire has given the modern world much for which it should be grateful. They then go on to justify the colonialization of the British Empire by saying, well, even though there was harms done, we brought those people salvation, and the ends justify the means. The success of the British Empire is due to God's salvation because they were a morally high people, and this is what they're teaching school children. Back to the show. Are the science lessons inaccurate too? There was a news report about
Loch Ness Monster.
About Loch Ness Monster. Did you learn just like made up creationism, like revisionism, like?
Yeah, it's all based in creationism.
Oh.
So you can figure out how that all goes. And in one of so that's in the Bob Jones University text for Bio 30, which is the grade 1230. There's stuff in the ACE curriculum as well around evolution and how it's not true and, you know, stuff like that. There's stuff in the Bob Jones text as well about cells when it talks about how cells divide, and it's cells divide because of God. That's how it works.
Man, God is fucking busy.
Yeah,
Is God just midichlorians?
Yeah, well, and that's like the thing with like the Loch Ness Monster is that they're using the cryptid Loch Ness Monster as proof that humans and dinosaurs lived on Earth at the same time. Like, you know, like you want to joke, you want to be like, well, the Flintstones isn't a documentary, but that's basically what's going on here, you know?
From an accelerated Christian education textbook. The term dinosaur was coined from two Greek words meaning terrible and lizard. Although we usually think of the larger dinosaurs, most were probably about the size of a horse or smaller. Good so far. Biblical and scientific evidence seems to indicate that men and dinosaurs lived at the same time. Some scholars believe that two references in the biblical book of Job refer to dinosaurs. One reference mentions the behemoth, whose description fits the brachiosaur, and the other refers to Leviathan, whose description fits the plesiosaur. Job's description indicates that either he personally saw these creatures or he was familiar with someone else who did see them. Pictures of dinosaurs have been discovered in ancient rock carvings and paintings. A reptile that seems to be an allosaur or a tyrannosaur is etched on the walls of the Rattlesnake Canyon in Colorado. The reoccurring dragon theme in folklore helps support the idea that dinosaurs coexisted with man. The Chinese dragons are well known, as are the Egyptian and Irish dragon mythologies. Beowulf is typical of many ancient stories in which a man slays a dreadful monster. Saint Michael and Saint George are often depicted in connection with dragons. These and other examples lead us to suspect that our ancestors may indeed have witnessed such creatures and then passed down the descriptions. That dinosaurs existed with humans is an important discovery, disproving the evolutionist theory that dinosaurs had lived 70 million years before man. God created dinosaurs on the sixth day. He created man later that same day. Dinosaur fossils come from those who died in the flood. The biblical Noah's flood they're talking about. As the floodwaters subsided, their bodies were covered in silt, fossilized, and preserved until their recent discovery. And just to seal the point that God seems to get into every corner of education in this case and sully it, here's the description for Biology 30, 12th grade biology in this school. This course helps students gain a deeper appreciation for our Creator by studying the complexity of the human body. Interesting discussions can take place surrounding what God's plan is for nutrition. You know, Matthew 16 verses 1 and 2, 5 fruits and veggies a day, yeah. This course also looks into genetics and the impact of biochemistry on our society. Students are challenged to continue to develop their own worldview on controversial issues such as cloning and stem cell research. An understanding of what the theory of evolution is and its shortcomings are looked at along with creationism. Students will leave this course with an understanding of current scientific research and how this impacts them in their faith. Well, imagine you go to this school, you learn that the goddamn Loch Ness Monster's real and that cells divide because of God, not because of biology, and then you want to become a nurse and you have to take a few units of university-level biology. You might be fucked, right?
For sure, and there has been people who have had to take university courses more than once. Or go back and take, basic
actual biology,
high school biology, myself one, to actually gain an understanding of that, because it did not prepare a lot of people, majority of people, to learn in a different post-secondary place, because, or even people that left the school or were kicked out and had to go to a public school, that just was so foreign to them. People who have been successful academically, it's in spite of all of this. And it's because of all the hard work they've had to put in to be successful and to learn things that they should have been learning starting when they were 10 years old.
Yeah.
homeschool kids. If they want to be accepted at a Regents or a community college here, they have a process they go through to be accepted. And maybe that's how some of these kids were able to do that, by going through that process. But we don't know how many of those kids. We have no idea what the curriculum is. Homeschoolers they have to show that they have mastered all the core subjects that a student graduating from a non-public or a public high school would have to do. The curriculum has to be reviewed. What did these kids learn in the situation they were in before they can be accepted? It just really bothers me that we're making an exception for this one school with a program that does not have a very good background. Accelerated Christian education, some of the things they teach, I'm not sure that would qualify them to be going to a Regents University at all.
Workbook 1, Cells and Tissues. It's the invisible world, microscopic census site. It's like I'm just waiting for something to jump out, and so far everything looks okay. But you know they're getting close to evolution, and some of them are like, how animals change over time. I'm like, bullshit, you don't teach about that. I know you don't.
Well, the one textbook they use for sakes for the bio and stuff like that is from, I don't even want to misquote, it's from the one university. Bob Jones, yeah. And it's like outlawed in even like stupid like states like Florida. If Florida's banned it, it's probably not, wonderful material, and like everybody's talking about the Loch Ness Monster thingy, but that's more funny more than anything, that you think that it's appropriate that dinosaurs and humans lived along at the same time. But no, it even talks about like how Jesus' blood is like the founding, the tissue that started the bacteria in the first place and all this other stuff. And I'm just like, oh God.
Jesus Christ.
Yeah, no, it's a funny thing too. Like, that's one of my like go-tos. Like if I'm like frustrated or I see something like that makes me laugh at this, I'm like, Jesus Christ.
Yeah.
And then I'm like, oh.
Yeah.
It's a lot of the people that we've talked to and stuff that have gone to post-secondary, like they find out and like they're in like their second year of like university and they're like, what do you mean there was no dinosaurs? When this is like a 20-something-year-old person that's finding out for the first time that, that wasn't the way that it actually was, and like I remember like in those workbooks as well, like it was basically saying how like the carbon dating method is flawed and everything like that. Like, no, it's only a 6,000-year-old Earth kind of situation. And I was like,
I've watched a lot of Kent Hovind and like all of his lectures, and like a lot of the stuff that I read from Ace Materials seems to be like pretty much ringing the same. Like they take the times that dinosaurs were hoaxed by like, fraudulent paleontologists, and they say, see, that proves that dinosaurs are fake. It doesn't prove that there's some paleontologists that are frauds out there. All dinosaurs everywhere are fake because the Piltdown Man was a thing and all that.
Oh, it's funny too, because like they'll show like this one obviously like ridiculous photo of like up in the mountains where they figured out where the Ark must have been, and they show how there's like fossil remains up that high, and that's because the Earth was covered in water, and that's where that creature must have died. And they make all these reasons. When the floods broke up, the Earth broke open and the water came up, and then the rain came down and. There was no room on the Ark for them and other stuff. There's so much ridiculousness. Like it's just, but they like try to make everything sound so serious by using like fancy words, and then I'm looking back at this and I was just like, how ridiculous. Like,
and they come up with like sub explanations that makes it sound like they really considered it, but it's just still further bullshit. Like they'll say, well, the dinosaurs didn't make it on the Ark because they were too big. And then they'll like respond to themselves saying, but a lot of dinosaurs could have fit on the Ark. But what happened was they were too dumb to avoid the floodwaters and didn't make it to Noah's Ark. Or they say that, Noah couldn't get them to fuck after the boat ride, so that's why they died out. Or they say climate change happened on Earth, and the Earth was colder, and those dinosaurs on the new Earth died out.
water that surrounded the earth. Actually, the sky used to be pink.
Oh, no.
That's when the Pangea was all still together. The flood, when the earth broke up and the floods came up from the ground, that's what broke us into continents. And that canopy, along with the ozone, is what made the world a more humid and warmer place. And that's why the world is colder in some places now. It's all, they all have a reason, like a something for everything. That's just to follow their narrative.
Yeah.
So
they use enough scientific words to sound legitimate. Like it's like the educational equivalent of me throwing on a doctor's coat and hanging out the emergency room, you know? Like, giving unsolicited advice. Like, I'm sure I've watched enough seasons of House, I can use medical terms.
House. Yeah.
Good shit.
Good shit.
Just going to remind folks out there, as a literal demon from the pits of hell, it is the 8th out of 9 circles that the frauds go into, which is most of what we've been talking about, is just saying.
True.
So that leads me to my next line of questioning, which is, this place has been described as a cult.
It is a cult.
This church and school exhibits all the hallmarks of what we often think of as a cult. They were involved in every aspect of their members' lives. When it comes to the philosophy and beliefs the church and school has and carried under, reference is made in the claim to the principles that were enunciated years ago by Keith Johnson, who was a pastor for a long time at that church and a former principal and director of the school. I'm going to quote but a couple of examples of what his literature says. When I was a child, I often wanted to run through the house and jump on furniture, yell at my parents, and be ill-mannered at the table. But my dad hadn't been trained in the handling of hyperactive children. At such times, how I would have loved to have some medication. But Dad didn't know he was supposed to give me medication. Instead, he gave me a spanking. I wasn't nearly as hyper after he got through with me. I quote, "We apply the same standards of response to hyperactive children in our Christian school, and the problem isn't a problem for long." It goes on to say, spanking should be a ritual. A ritual is any practice regularly repeated in a set, precise manner. There are hundreds of examples, many more set out in the claim, but I'll touch off on this final one. The manual says, have him bend over. They're now explaining how to spank someone. Have him bend over and apply the paddle firmly. Don't permit any wiggling around or jumping around. Don't allow any pre-disciplined howling and sniveling. Don't let his crying and begging diminish the degree or severity of the punishment. These were principles that school and that church adopted and accepted and carried out.
The place where I went to school and church was a cult masquerading as an evangelical church. That is the best way to describe it. For me, the light bulb really went off when I was in university and I was taking psychology, and we were talking about what constitutes a cult and how people get sucked into cults and religions. And this is something that doesn't happen overnight. A lot of people that I graduated grade 12 with, I had started at the age of 4 in kindergarten with. But there was all of these components: behavior control, information control, thought control, emotional control, all those components that constitute and make up a cult were there. I think a lot of people see things on TV and, cults in the United States that are more talked about, and it's hard for them to wrap their mind around the fact that there is a lot of churches that are masquerading as churches that are actual cults. So it was a whole game to them. So we as students at the school, we couldn't talk to each other about certain things. There were certain things we were allowed to talk, about, but there were certain things we weren't allowed. So we had to talk to our counselors, and it was really just a way of them getting information from us, because there were times where I did need somebody to talk to that I thought was a safe person. So I talked to her, And then I ended up in the director of our school's office. But again, it was really just a ruse. It was a game. They just wanted to get information from us. Because once they were able to get information from the students, that's how they had the opportunity to corporally discipline us. And that's what the whole end game and the whole goal was when I was in high school anyways. That was the goal. It was find out what the students are doing that's wrong. And then even when students weren't doing anything wrong, they would actually try and pit us against each other. It was a whole manipulative game.
Speaking of cults, remember the 2017 thesis written by Jenna Scaramanga? In that thesis, she goes into the tools of indoctrination she found being used by accelerated Christian education and schools that use those materials. I'm going to be summarizing a lot of text into a small digestible chunk, so please reference the thesis if you want to read through her full arguments. So one tool of indoctrination she found within ACE education schools is biblical inerrancy. ACE documents claim that the Bible is the absolute truth, and that any competing truth is false. In ACE schools, the absolute truth of the Bible is extended to educational materials, school employees, and church officials as well. So not only do they push that the Bible is unable to be argued against or questioned, but everybody in positions of authority above them are as well, which leads to the indoctrination. Here's a quote from an ACE science textbook. If a person says something that does not agree with what God has said in the Holy Bible, then we know that person is wrong. Some science books have mistakes because people have written them and people make mistakes. However, there are no mistakes in God's book, the Holy Bible. Number 2, built-in defense mechanisms. ACE educational materials teach that any lessons learned outside of ACE, the school, and the church are wrong because they are ungodly. An ACE social studies lesson argues that sin renders a person incapable of being reasonable, and that implies that anyone who isn't a church member or has a contrary opinion to the church is sinful. A Times Magazine article critical of ACE garnered a response from a 1988 principal of an ACE school, and he put another defense mechanism like this very succinctly. He said about the negative article, "Of course the article's negative. It's ungodly. They poison the well of any contradictory opinion in order to make it easier for the students to immediately reject contrary opinions when they run into them. That helps reinforce the indoctrination they have already been taught." Number 3, the fear of hell. The fear of hell is used as a tool to indoctrinate in ACE education. In ACE English classes, texts are selected that often emphasize the brutality of hell. This includes John Edwards' sermon, "Sinners in the Hands of an Angry God." Here's an excerpt. "Men are held in the hand of God over the pit of hell. They have deserved the fiery pit and are already sentenced to it, and God is dreadfully provoked. The devil is waiting for them. Hell is gaping for them. The flames gather and flash about them. All that preserves them every moment is the mere arbitrary will and uncovenanted, unobliged forbearance of an incensed God." The lesson is very clear. Sinners will go to hell and suffer, and sinners in ACE materials and schools are framed as anyone that opposes the church, the school, or course materials. If all else fails, you may keep yourself within this indoctrinated environment because you fear that your soul will be tortured for all eternity if you don't. The 4th tool mentioned in this thesis is poor educational processes. ACE relies on students memorizing often misleading facts. The nature of these facts being very black and white without room for interpretation. These facts are also taught in a very truncated way, so that the student only knows the facts that they've memorized and is unable to build critical thinking and bigger thoughts on top of that. Let me give you an example. In a standard social studies class, you may learn all the different factors that make civilizations work. Animal domestication, the development of politics, access to resources, placement along rivers, etc. In ACE social studies lessons, you learn that civilizations thrive when they obey God and go into decline when they turn away from him. In a standard science lesson, you may learn exactly how famous scientists conducted their research and made their discoveries. In ACE science lessons, you learn that scientists learn things by inventing unproven theories so that they can receive money. Keeping students ignorant and not letting them develop critical thinking skills makes indoctrination easier. Compliance is the fifth tool. ACE schools and ACE materials such as handbooks and charters have very strict guidelines as to how students are to dress and behave and more. Their freedoms are very restricted and their behavior is regimented and controlled. From a grade 11 and 12 charter students had to sign at an ACE school. I am bringing myself into agreement with the Lord under my parents' direction that it is right for me to be at the school. I wish to submit to the principal and staff. They stand in place of my parents in authority over me while I am at school. I set my heart to pray about my future and to seek God's will for my life. A strict, regimented environment makes students more susceptible to indoctrination that happens to them. The sixth tool is rewards. ACE schools operate a reward system that is used to expose students to more religious materials and church activities. So, you can move from the lowest reward level up higher levels by having good grades, by not breaking school rules, and by participating in church activities. You have to allow yourself to further fall into their authoritarian rules, more strictly follow them without question, consume more of the ACE materials, or you can participate with the church directly through this reward system. At the lowest level, A privilege, students get 5 extra minutes of break time every day, and 1 extracurricular activity in place of schoolwork every week. The freedoms increase with each level until you reach the highest level, E privilege, where students gain freedoms such as being able to leave the school without supervision and leaving their seat without permission. The highest level students were already so dedicated to the church and school that they wouldn't want to leave campus and wouldn't want to indulge in the freedoms they've earned, while students at lower levels, seeking more freedom, would consume more materials and participate with the church more until they become dedicated enough that they, when they reach the highest level, are now dedicated enough to the church that they don't indulge in those freedoms. It's really a manipulative reward system to make consumption of church materials and religious materials increase. And the last is indoctrinary systems. ACE schools are often inseparable from the churches that sponsor them. This also happens at a school employment level as well, where the number of certified teachers are often very limited and church officials and those the church approve of fill school jobs. This is done to keep the indoctrination of religious systems and ACE, quote-unquote, pure. And that's the quotes they use in ACE materials. They suggest schools keep their faculty and student body, quote-unquote, pure.
So the lawsuit, when did you first make the decision that you were going to come forward with this?
So I came forward to Saskatoon Police, and I can tell you how many days ago that was. It was 517 days ago.
And our recording date is Saturday, the 5th of November, 2022.
When I went forward, I thought I was going to be the only person that went forward. I had my few people from the school that the Nolin family, and I had, them and, a couple other students that I would talk to. But after we left, we all just kind of exploded apart. And it was even kind of traumatizing to be around certain people because, there's certain people that have gotten out now. But during that time, they were definitely manipulated to do stuff to other students. So It was hard to be around them as an adult now. So a lot of us were not in contact with each other. And I came forward, and I had another student that had reached out to me a year prior, just saying what would be our legal options if we did come forward. And I said, well, there's no statute of limitations on child abuse in Saskatchewan. And I said, these were the current laws with corporal punishment. Everything over 2004 was 100%. Like, there's not even a question of gray area there. That was criminal. And then I explained the 4 kind of regulations that they had in place where corporal punishment was legal. So I said, if you are corporally punished outside of these boundaries, then that is illegal. And, here's your options. So when I went forward, I messaged him, said, hey, I'm coming forward. He texted me, said, I went to police and gave a statement. So, and then that kind of started the trickle. By this point, it's October and my birthday month. So I got together with a few people and I told them, I said, I'm going forward. This other person's gone forward. And then by the end of the year, there was 18 people who had gone forward. So we started having some discussions within our group. What did we want to do? How else did we want to pursue this? And we talked about pursuing it civilly. So we did look into it. We met with some lawyers. The cost was too much. There were some lawyers in Saskatoon that refused. They said we would never do that because they had people in their office who are religious. We did have one law firm that we really felt like the people there embodied people that we could trust, because that's a huge issue with all of us, obviously.
No kidding.
We reached, had a meeting with them and they got it. They got it. We talked to them. We gave them examples, showed them our police reports, gave them, some of the documented proof we had, whether it was documents from the church or school at the time. They were like, yes, this is insane. And they got it, but we couldn't afford them. So we decided as a group to table it because we thought, okay, when charges are pressed, then maybe we could crowdfund for our legal fees. So that's kind of what we agreed to do. Now, as somebody who works in the justice system, I can empathize that processes take a very long time and especially historical. Mm-hmm. But when you have this amount of people all giving statements that the police themselves have said all corroborate each other, mm-hmm. we felt like it was taking an extended amount of time considering the gravity of these allegations and the fact that 99% of these people are still actively in a position of authority over children in different ways. So it got to the point where us as a group, we sat down and said, knowing like our experience, knowing that these people are around kids, we cannot justifiably sit back and wait for criminal charges till we become public with this. So we did tell police, you have till August 1st. If there's no criminal charges, we will be going public. The file had been investigated by police and sent to the Crown for review. We went forward and we did a story with CBC, and there was a lot of anxiety around the day it coming out and the day before it came out. And we didn't know how people were going to respond because it's really hard when you haven't grown up in this area, in this type of lifestyle and in a cult, when trying to describe to people the full understanding of the power these people had over your lives. When the story came out, the law firm that we had spoken with called us and said, we want to represent you. And I said, I know, but we can't afford you. We can't afford this. And there's a lot of people in our core student group. There's some people who have been so traumatized that they have not been able to hold gainful employment, or they have not been able to hold employment that has, any sort of stress to it. So they're very limited in their work and, their pay, right? Mm-hmm. And asking victims to pay for, taking their abusers to court is just re-victimizing. So the law firm came to us and said, okay, we can do, this cost per person on the front end. What do you think about that? And I said, okay, that's reasonable. We'll take it back to the student group. And student group said totally reasonable. And, a few of us said, for the few people we know that cannot pay, like we will pay, we'll do what we can as a group. And the next day, Mile 2 released their statement. And I don't know if anybody had the chance to read that.
Their statement does read, "We're all heartbroken to learn the stories of some former students about their experiences from over 15 years ago.
Right.
The current staff and leadership are hearing some of these stories for the first time, and we condemn any acts of abuse that previous leaders committed. They also said there have been significant leadership and staff changes over the last 7 years, and the people that are accused of these actions are no longer here or affiliated with us in any way.
Bullshit.
Yeah, so that statement, again, so inaccurate because they're not viewing in their minds the teachers that stood by and watched this abuse, because some of these teachers that were still there were there from the late 80s.
Yeah.
And they're not viewing them not standing up and saying something. They were not only complicit. This is not a case of these teachers that were still there just sitting back and being like, you know, oh, I don't agree with this, but I'm just going to like be in the background. No, some of these teachers were very integral in getting children disciplined by, you know, spanked. I need to change that from my verbiage. It is not discipline. It is abuse. And they participated in it. They may not have been swinging the paddle on the kid, but they still participated in it.
They brought the kid to the paddler. Yes.
Or they made the complaint that they knew would get the kid spanked.
Mm-hmm.
So, you know, that the whole statement is just so inaccurate. It is a contradictory statement. It's 3 or 4 paragraphs. It basically says, you know, they're saddened to hear about the stories. It says in one paragraph that they're hearing
many of these for the first time.
Yeah, majority of these stories for the first time. And then in the next paragraph, it says, but they've made several apologies for these things. They've been apologizing over the last 8 years or something. So it was a bit contradictory and also very patronizing. And that really lit a fire under people when Mile 2 put that out, just the general public themselves, because it was so patronizing.
We didn't hear about it, but we've been saying sorry, guys. But we had no idea that this was happening, but sorry.
Yeah, we've been apologizing for this for 8 years, so at least they were nice enough to indict themselves.
These apologies, as far as you know, didn't occur. You don't know anyone that actually received an apology.
In our
right?
in our core group of 18, there is nobody in there that was reached out to by the church or school to receive an apology. There is one former student in our core group of 18 that came forward first, that she went to the current pastor and said, I've heard that you have apologized to people that are still in the congregation or still team church, and you've apologized to them. And she's like, why have you never reached out to me? Like, the church ripped my whole family apart and caused all this trauma in our lives. And the pastor basically was like, oh, well, I'm sorry. So they made the onus for us to go ask for an apology, which is disgusting.
That's disgusting.
And so repulsive. And that was when the law firm made the decision to represent us without a cost up front. Because they were so enraged that, you know, people have come forward and shared their stories. And that was the response.
My name is Grant Sharpstein, here along with one of the representative plaintiffs in this action, Caitlin Erickson. Many students of the Legacy Christian Academy, this day has been a long time coming. Yesterday afternoon, a class action lawsuit was commenced. The class includes every student who attended that school, Christian Academy, from 1982 when it opened to today, that has suffered abuse. And it also includes minors who attended that church that may have suffered abuse, but were not necessarily students. Now, this class action names Mile 2 Church, Inc. as a defendant. It's the registered owner of that property and runs the school and the church, along with 21 designated and named defendants. Those are Keith Johnson, John Olaboboken, Ken Schultz, Nathan Rysavy, Duff Friesen, Lynette Wheeler, Joel Hall, Fran Thibodeau, Lou Brunel, James Randall, Tracy Johnson, Simbo Olabobuken, Elaine Schultz, Catherine Randall, Kevin McMillan, Ann McMillan, Don Beaudry, Nathan Schultz, Aaron Benoweiss, Deidre Benoweiss, Stephanie Case, and of course the church that I mentioned. We've also named, from a legal principle, John Doe's and Jane Doe's, because as this matter progresses, others may yet be added. The allegations in the claim include alleged physical, sexual, psychological, mental, emotional, and spiritual abuse. Those are the comments that I have. I'm going to ask Caitlin to step forward. She has a few things she wants to say, and we'll open it up for questions from the media.
Hey, afternoon. My name is Caitlin Erickson. I attended Christian Center Academy and Christian Center Ministries from 1992 until 2005 when I graduated. The organization did a rebranding and it is now known as Mile 2 Church and Legacy Christian Academy, respectively. I am so thankful for so many of my peers that have found the courage to tell their stories so that we may move forward to a place of healing. During my tenure in that building, I was subjected to physical, emotional, psychological, and sexual abuse. Due to daily intimidation, manipulation, isolation, destruction of self-worth, and abuse during our time there, many students, including myself, have compounded trauma from being a part of this organization. Many of us struggle with this trauma every single day of our lives. Specifically during my high school years at Christian Center Academy, the staff tried to physically and psychologically break me. Despite their best efforts, they were not successful, and that's why I'm able to stand here today. So thank you. I think this was a long time coming, and although the positive support has just been a bit overwhelming, because growing up in this type of environment, we were constantly gaslit that we weren't abused and that everything they were doing was legal and okay. So it has been, very overwhelming to see the positive, because that's just not something we have. We're going to trust the legal process as far as, what's coming down the line. This is the first time a lot of these people have been named to be held accountable. So this is just the start, and we realize that as students, but it's a very good start in my opinion.
Okay, again, I want to thank media for coming out today and taking an interest in this case. Getting the word out is very important, and I think it's a story that needs to be told, will be told. And again, I want to particularly thank those students that are here for their courage and for being here, and to let you know we're with you and we're going to pursue this to the end. Again, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Probably don't feel like they've done any wrong. They just want to keep their donors.
I would say it's a little bit of both. For myself, the student group, we agreed that we were going to give the church a chance when we came forward to do the right thing. And we said, okay, I was not on that side of saying, let's give them a chance. But a lot of my peers were like, if they have changed and that is the line they are going to continue to tote, then great. Let's see that in their response and how they react when we come forward. And, it was just so evident that the same mindset is alive and well there. And we knew that with some individuals, that we've seen their social media. We've seen the stuff they post still in 2022, posting extremely homophobic, disgusting things.
It speaks to their level of arrogance and entitlement. They don't think they've done anything wrong, and they don't truly feel sorry. They're just sorry that it became public and became a big story, so they're just throwing bones to try and quiet down the masses, and they don't truly care about retribution or any type of making peace with the victims or anything like that. They just want the heat to die down. It says right in the Old Testament, spare the rod, spoil the child. So, like, they feel probably biblically
justified in doing this.
Yeah.
I don't know if anybody saw the YouTube video, but CBC did an article on it. The current pastor of Mile 2 got up from the pulpit and said that he doesn't know if some of the stories are true, but he thinks they're exaggerated. And he said that right from the pulpit.
Holy.
And then he went on a tangent kind of about how sometimes when you're trying to do the right thing, you do the wrong thing. So it was like, is that a self-admittance?
Yeah.
I've never actually forgotten my keys at home and then beat a child instead, but whatever.
It was pretty bizarre. And to have the continued, doubling down on going after victims instead of actually just supporting us. People said, let's give Mile 2 a chance to do the right thing. And I was like, nope.
No.
I didn't want to, but that was what the group decided. So we gave them a chance. And, the response has just been totally laughable. That YouTube video was like 3 weeks ago, like a month ago or something. So it was significantly after the article had come out. And that is how bold they are. Like, gets up, calls, essentially is calling us liars from the pulpit, and then puts it on YouTube.
Yeah, that's bold.
And then another pastor came into town, Keith Johnson. He is my dad, and he pastored here for a number of different years. And so along that journey, there's a lot of people that have come and gone. There's a lot of things that have happened within our church community. There's a lot of things that have taken place, some good, some bad. Many of you are hearing some stories over this last month of different things that are a part of our church history. And here's all I have to say to that right now. We'll talk more in the information meeting. Some of the stories are true. Some of the stories I think are exaggerated. Some of them, I don't know if they're true or not. We've got to trust that the truth is going to come to light, and we want the truth to come to light. But here's what we do know. We do know that in the journey of a church, and this can happen in any church, and this can happen in any place, and this has happened all throughout church history, that sometimes on the journey of following Jesus, we find ourselves following something other than Jesus. And it's easy to get confused between following Jesus and following a religion. And it's easy to get sidetracked on what you once knew was the main thing. You can have your attention diverted and you can make something else the main thing. But it sounds so much like the main thing that you miss it. You don't realize that actually, I thought I was following Jesus, but really I'm actually just following a list of rules. Or literally, I'm just following a certain set of ideas that look and sound similar, but they're different. And sometimes what happens, again, this has happened all throughout church history. If you find yourself in this place, don't feel bad about yourself. I mean, there's something to grieve over, definitely when you come to this realization. But what can happen is you'll wake up one day and you thought you were following Jesus. You thought you were, doing the right things, but you wake up to realize that actually you're not following Jesus. That you're following things that are similar to Jesus, but back down the road there was a fork in the road, and you actually ended up following some ideas. You ended up following some teachings. You were following a list of rules more than you were following a person. And sometimes when you take that wrong turn, or sometimes when you wake up and find yourself there, you have a variety of different realizations. Sometimes you have a lot to mourn, you have a lot to grieve over. Other times it was an honest mistake. You missed it. And so you go back to try to make it right. And so that's what's happened over the history of our church. And that's what's happened at various points along the way. Our church has a history. It's our history. And there's no denying it. There's no trying to bury it. There's no trying to just, do away with it, sweep it under the rug. It is what it is. And here's the thing, it's part of our story here as a church. And I believe it's part of the story that Jesus wants to redeem and what he wants to do to tell of his goodness and to show that he is a God of redemption and that he still cares for his church. And if we'll allow him, he will still fulfill his promise. Like he said, that he is building his church. He is building his church, despite sometimes us thinking we know how to do it better. But see, if we yield and we let him build his church, guess what? He says that when he's the one that's building his church, the gates of hell cannot prevail against it, that it will stand and it will endure. Jesus still is the Christ, the Son of the living God, and Jesus still is the way, the truth, and the life, and Jesus is still building his church. And so there's a lot of things that we do need to give up on and let go of and deconstruct and sweep out of the way. But one of them, or two of them, isn't Jesus or his church. That I want to encourage you, never give up on Jesus and never give up on his church. When Jesus was standing trial, did he fight for his rights? No. Instead, he laid his rights down so that others could find redemption and grace and forgiveness. When Jesus was faced with the cross, did he ask, well, wait a minute, what does the law require of me? Or, what's in it for me? No, when Jesus was looking at the cross, he didn't ask what the law required of him. He didn't ask what was in it for him. Instead, he asked, what does love require of me? And Jesus living out from that motivation changed everything for you and for me.
Former students of this private Christian school and church are outraged. That's because the current pastor gave a sermon here on Sunday, casting doubt on some of their abuse allegations.
It's painful, yes. It's still shocking to me because I just cannot imagine gaslighting victims, even if I was not a victim. So it's shocking, it's harmful, it's gaslighting, but we are also very resilient because this has been our life. So I think that there are people out there who are feeling minimized by this kind of sermon. Know that there are almost 100 more who absolutely support you and believe in you and don't believe you're exaggerating.
I'm reading off of Twitter here. This was a tweet that was put out by someone on the 2nd of August of this year. This person says, "This is appalling. One of our own city councilors apparently belongs to this church attached to this school. Children deserve a safe space to learn and grow. I hope charges are coming." Followed by, "Hey, Randy Donauer, this school is associated with your church, the one you do YouTube videos for. I think you need to come out and publicly denounce this. Children deserve safe spaces to learn. There are broken lives because of this." To which Randy Donauer has replied, and I quote, "Agreed. I denounce abuse of any kind and encourage anyone who has been abused to contact the police immediately." End quote. What's your reaction to that tweet?
When I saw that tweet, just the wording he uses, you know that they don't believe what they did was abuse and they don't categorize it as that. And that's part of the problem. It was a bit strange to me to hear him, or to see that and read that, knowing everything that I know about him and my own personal experience with him. So yes, it was very disingenuous, and I felt it was just, I'll throw a quick tweet out and this is going to,
placate the masses.
Yeah. And this, again, I'm sure they thought this was just going to blow over like every other time. And that would be that.
Welcome to Mile 2 Church. It is so great for us to gather as a community. My name is Carrie Lynn, and I'm a part of the family ministry team here at Mile 2. Coming up in just a minute, we're going to worship together. Then Randy Donauer will share today's message.
Good morning. My name's Randy, and welcome to Mile 2 Online. We're so glad you joined us today. Good morning. My name's Randy, and I'm part of the team here at Mile 2. Good morning. My name is Randy, and for the next few minutes, I'd like to walk you through a little bit of a vision test. Hi, my name is Randy, and I have a message for the church today. Good morning, and welcome to Mile 2 Online. We're so glad that you chose to join us this morning.
He does have an office at the church there.
Oh.
And he often, yes. So I believe he is an employee of the church because nobody who's not an employee wouldn't have an office there.
What the fuck is his job title?
They referred to him as an They literally referred to him as an enforcer.
What?
Nice.
Let me clarify. In some of the news articles I've been reading, people had described Randy Donauer as an enforcer. I will also point out Randy Donauer said that any allegations are vehemently false and he will litigate anyone who says that. So that's just like my opinion, man.
Yeah.
Yeah, generally, if your religion starts needing enforcers, you might want to take a look at how you're structured and what you're doing.
And there is a video up on, I have it on my Twitter, of Randy Donauer removing people from the church building on behalf of Keith Johnson. And Don Windles can also be heard in that video.
This is the clip that Kate is talking about. This happened around 2009. There was a Christmas concert at the school. An email went out that invited the friends and family of students to this Christmas concert. A mother of a student arrived with some extended family, I think it was uncles, and the uncles were not allowed in because they were not church members. And you'll hear Randy kick them out.
Need to call, or but nothing was communicated to you in advance, or?
No, not really. No, Kevin said that maybe they shouldn't come because for some reason they're not allowed. But my daughter is called asking them because they're not. So I don't really understand. Hey there.
You're allowed in. The rest are.
Okay, no, I want to know why.
Because I said so.
Yeah, but because I said so.
Yeah, I'll
Mr.
call my cop.
Donauer, I'm sorry. Call the
call the
cops.
cops.
You can.
I will.
That's quite all right.
Okay.
And I'll explain to them that you are ruining an 8-year-old daughter's life.
We've been through this with the cops. As a
No.
matter of fact, I think you and your cousin were here last time. So the cops will explain to you
And then
that
my
you're going to
cousin?
jail.
We're going to jail for what?
For public trespassing and nuisance. If you don't leave
Hey,
private
but quite
property,
honestly,
you're welcome.
Mr. Donauer,
You're
please.
welcome. You're
Nobody
welcome.
has been
She's from
informed.
No, what's the difference here?
Stop,
Honestly,
just stop talking.
No, you stop. Honestly, what's
Nobody
the
has
difference?
been informed
I'm
that
not
this
talking to
is
you.
transport.
What is the difference
Is trespassing. Nobody. So how do you
Okay,
arrest
I'm asking you to
somebody
leave
for
right now.
trespassing?
I'm asking you to leave. You. Why is that? Because
Well, we were just told that he was
I
allowed
will do
in.
nothing. Leave
Mr.
or I call the
Donauer.
cops, and this time I will not let them off the hook. I will say the
Okay, you know what? I am phoning my lawyer tonight. I am phoning every media that I can because this is not Christmas spirit, A, and it is not Christian-like, B, and it is going to ruin Ariana. And that is on you, just so you know.
Thank you very much. You can have a good night. Away you go. Go call the media. Go call
personally
whoever you
invited
want.
by my niece. And you come to my Christmas concert. I want you to be there to see
Carly, we
me sing.
explained
Come
it to you
on.
last time.
Yeah,
Yeah, but what is your explanation? Like, you don't even have, like, all you're saying is, like,
I owe you
don't
no
even
explanation. You're not coming.
You know what?
I owe
you
you
owe me an
nothing.
explanation. You owe me an explanation.
No, I owe you nothing.
Yes, you do, because
I
this
owe
is
you
my child.
You're welcome to come. Nobody else.
You guys, you know, I'm honest to God, I will be taking her out of here. If this is the way that this, what happens at her
Do
grad?
whatever you want.
Tell
I
me
don't
what happens
respond to
at her
threats.
grade 12 grad.
Do whatever you want. I don't respond to threats.
Honestly.
Go ahead.
What happens at her grade
Away you
12
go.
grad?
Away you go. Out the door, Andrew.
Yeah, there is no understanding here whatsoever. This is
You don't want to be
ridiculous.
arrested, I promise.
Why does Jeremy have to go then?
You don't want to be arrested.
Why does
And we
Jeremy
were
have to
just
go?
told Jeremy
Carly,
could
I owe
stay.
you zero explanation.
We were just
Yeah,
told
you do.
Jeremy could stay.
By who?
Mr. Kitchen, right there. Or, no, Mr.
Hey,
Window.
who's Jeremy?
Right here, that would be my brother.
Who is your brother?
Yeah.
Hey, come on in.
So how come he can stay?
He's either come or he goes. Hey, what's the difference
Okay, you
here?
know what? You guys are
There's no
leaving,
difference.
and I will be in contact with my lawyer.
Hold up. There's no difference.
No,
Go
don't.
afraid.
Good.
Go.
And
you
she's
go.
not coming back here.
I mean, with Donauer's comments, I mean, you can kind of see where he disconnects abuse from what he would consider discipline. I believe a few weeks ago there was a story about Coy and Nolin coming out where he had said that Donauer himself had paddled him as when he was a teenager.
Yeah, there was 3 students that actually spoke to CBC, and Coy was the only one that went on the record publicly. But yeah, so there was more than one person that had contacted, you know, and is part of the process on the civil suit now. That was, you know, says they were spanked by Randy. And, you know, the one situation that Coy talks about when we were teenagers, it was in the summertime, we were, you know, voluntold we would be volunteering at this camp. And, you know, the reason he was punished was because there was someone in, you know, an affluent family His son was also a counselor at the camp. And then one of the elders' daughters was at the camp. And he had made kind of suggestions that, oh, they're pretty close, like they must be dating. And, had made some comments like that. That was around the reason that he was spanked by him.
And when you say spanked, this is with a wooden paddle.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then he wasn't allowed to be around me either at camp. So there was a lot of like, it was, we'll physically punish you and isolate you. And that was constantly going on. Yeah, that was the summer before Coy was kicked out of the school. So.
Here's a quote from Randy Donauer. I do not expect to have any role in the court process given my conduct. After being asked, have you ever paddled a child connected to your roles in the church or school? If so, please provide dates and details. If not, are you aware it happened? And he said, I'm not going to be part of this court case.
All I can speak of is from my experiences. This is what happened it was actually the summer before my hell year. So it was, but I was already 16. So, which is well past when corporal punishment is allowed to be used on children before the 2004 Supreme Court ruling. I would like to point out, because before that you had to be above 2 and under 12. You actually had to do something that your punishment actually deemed fitting to actually be struck.
Yeah.
Which I feel like, kids maybe getting caught cheating in their paces wasn't something they should have been spanked for. Just saying. Maybe some words from the principal or, a suspension or something. But the fact that it was also happening outside of school functions, this was technically a part of the children's church.
Yeah.
And I wasn't even a part of children's church. I was the counselor, or a counselor. I was the junior counselor. So yeah, no, I was, there was me and a person that was like 1 or 2 years older than me, our cabin had I think our group of kids was like 7 or 8, but I was the one that got spanked. So, yeah, it was, yeah.
Something else I understand about the 2004 ruling is implements aren't allowed to be used, and they used heavy wooden paddles.
You had to be older than 2, younger than 12. The administered corporal punishment had to be within reason of whatever you had done wrong, and you were not allowed to use implements. So I guess you basically should have had to, strike them with your hand. I guess that would have been technically what the law was. But I know, yeah, they used big ass paddles. They looked like cricket paddles, but they were handcrafted, so they were bougie.
Yeah. And people underestimate paddles because they've seen them on The Simpsons in the fucking Masons episode or whatever that is, and they'll think, oh, a paddle, people get paddled at school, but I want people to understand how hardcore paddles are. I know people in the kink community, people that are consensually into pain, that enjoy pain, and a lot of them cannot take the pain of a paddle, because a paddle will often instantly bruise upon hitting. And from what I understand about how they use paddles, they were encouraged to don't let the crying of the child take away from the strength of your swings and stuff like that.
Yeah, and it also didn't help that some of them didn't have very good aim. So we'd have welts on the back of our thighs instead, or a bruised back and stuff. It was a running joke between a few of us my last year there that were we should take pictures of our backsides and go to the police. And it was just a joke, but I'm like, holy shit, we should have done that,
That sounds a little bit like a haha kidding, just kidding, unless.
Yeah, well, exactly. Who knew? We didn't realize it was going to be where it currently is right now. So,
even a mild incorrect strike with a paddle can cause nerve damage and issues. I imagine that some people that were struck in this way at the school probably have lasting physical damage with them.
Yeah, that's definitely probably the case for some people, especially people who had more stricter parents at home. We were obviously probably extremely strict compared to a lot of other people's normal people standards, I guess.
Yeah.
But even that, we were, my mom had not struck us personally for many years prior to that. She was kind of just this is odd, but this is where we kind of need to go. This is where we're supposed to be kind of situation, until she said enough was enough. And even then, like, that got turned around on her too. Like, she left like a very genuine, heartfelt letter underneath the pastor of the church's, at the time, Keith Johnson's windshield. And he actually like took that letter and he read excerpts from it on the pulpit. And he took it out of context and he basically made her sound like this terrible mother and this terrible person. And he did that in front of my grandparents and other family members that were still in the church. Like, I was just like, what a disgusting, bad man.
What effect did attendance at the school have on the various plaintiffs' mental health?
Oh, it's, a lot of people have talked about being very suicidal, engaging in self-harm, leaving the place and being so traumatized that they are trying to self-medicate and end up in addictions of, various different kinds. Some people, it almost created a psychotic break in their mind because they were told this is the expectation of who you need to be, this perfect Christian person in a box. And they weren't that. And they were trying so hard to be somebody they weren't. So it was almost this like break of who they were. And it's taken some people so many years to get back to who they actually are as an individual. And some people have not been able to get back to that place. So there is so many different issues under mental health that have affected these people. And then physically as well, there's people that are suffering from nerve damage from the physical punishment. There's people like myself who have this ridiculous pain tolerance, have been in situations where I have ended up in the hospital because I can't read the signs my body is telling me when something is wrong. Because from all the corporal punishment, I just learned to shut down that part of my body that feels pain in order to cope. So this isn't just effects that happened. We're talking about like long-term, lifelong effects from attending this school and church.
Lives ruined.
Absolutely. Lives ruined. People that, they were trying so hard to cope in their early 20s. Not only did these people steal our childhood, our teenage years, then you're talking about the first decade of your adulthood because you're trying so hard to cope. These people were, in addictions or just living really unhealthy lifestyles, because when you come out of that, you're still trying to seek out that abusiveness because that's what you know. So there's a lot of people that engage in abusive relationships, and it just makes you the perfect victim being in that environment because you're taught not to question. You're taught not to protect yourself, not to look out for yourself. And so you become the perfect victim, and you have to unlearn that.
Something that Kate mentioned near the end of the episode that I think was really impactful was her describing the effects and lasting marks that growing up in that environment and going through those abuses left on her. Would you mind detailing any stuff that stuck with you even to this day?
Just once in a while, sometimes just like, I like to stay busy because then I can't get stuck in my own head. I feel like I'm fairly well adjusted, but there is obviously stuff that I deal with. Like I'm seeing a counselor. Reached out to victim services as well. They were kind of swamped when everybody first started coming forward. But it's like even just like the stupidness of like thinking that I'm going to hell for being who I am, and it's just, I'm like, no. But then it'll be like the next day or some other day and the next week. It's just like, oh God, I'm going to hell. Like, it's just, that lasting, doctrine, indoctrination that they just drill into you from an early age for years and years and years. It's hard to make that feeling go away. And I know I'm not. And then it's even a joke that, if all of us gay people are going to hell, then it's going to be one hell of a party, kind of. So
that's what I said. You go to heaven for the comfort, you go to hell for the company. It seems like
heaven for the climate, hell for the company, I believe.
Makes it funny too that there's a whole fire island. I was just like, ooh.
Is it like a reality show? I hope the host is cute.
Mark Twain. It was Mark Twain. Go to heaven for the climate, hell for the company.
There we go.
Yeah.
That's good. I like that.
Is there anything else that you would like to mention or elucidate?
It's okay to be gay. It's okay to be who you are. It's something I have to struggle with every day. And I just hope, it upsets me too. There's stuff coming out too, like if with Briarcrest and everything like that, that these are college students. College. I'm going to use that in a very big. But, these are like people that are like young adults, and they're still dealing with this kind of stuff in 2022 and everything like that. Like I don't know. I think it's just because we happen to live in the Bible Belt of Canada or what the fuck is going on with that. It genuinely bothers me. It's just like, and it's funny too, like they're the ones that are pointing the fingers, like the transphobes and like all the other like non-binary phobes and everyone that's always pointing fingers. It's always the people with the religion, and they're the ones that are causing the harm. And don't get me wrong, like I said this earlier, like I'm not anti-religion. I'm just anti-causing harm to people. Yeah. Just you do you, as long as you're not hurting yourself and you're not hurting other people. And I feel like it's just like I feel like it's a very simple concept, and I just don't quite grasp how people can hate so much. I think that's my biggest thing. Is just I don't get the hate.
Yeah, using such institutional power to convince a bunch of kids that a fundamental part of themselves is broken or wrong, like that's got to be a scar that lasts forever. I know people that dated women like well into their 40s. And like, they never really felt attracted to their girlfriends. But, you got to have a girlfriend. You got to have one around. And it wasn't until like they had their eyes open such late in life that they realized, oh, I am gay. And it was just, they got that shame and guilt stapled to them so early by some religious institution that they just live with it. It's tragic.
It is sad. Like even after like all the stuff that happened with my exorcism, I basically pretended it worked until I was 21.
Yeah.
I had girlfriends. I had like 4 girlfriends at once at the one time, and I was not a nice person to those girlfriends. So obviously, because I was not being honest with myself or with anybody else. So be true to you.
Do you think there's still abuse going on at the school and church?
We've had a former student that was there in 2009 who says he was corporally punished. And we have a few students actually. So they were corporally punishing students well past the 2004 mark. Mm-hmm. And it just really speaks to how they don't think the rules apply to them. They don't think the law applies to them. And that was very evident. So, to say, oh, whatever happened prior to 2004, well, okay, but literally the Supreme Court ruled in 2004 and you didn't care then. So to try and say things were different prior to that, no, they weren't. I can tell you that I have had students reach out to me that attended in as late as 2019 that have reached out to me about the emotional and the psychological abuse of staff that are still currently there.
What will winning this lawsuit do for your group? I think we suspect that will be the case. You will be successful in this. The reason we went the civil way as well is the police and Crown prosecution have a really hard time pursuing psychological and emotional abuse criminally. That's where the civil suit allows us to hold people accountable for those things because they can't really be held criminally. For us, it's just, it's about leaving the world a better place than it was for us and making sure that there's boundaries in place so that this does not happen again. In our situation, we're talking about 4 decades of abuse victims. There just needs to be no more victims from this place. These people need to be held accountable. These loopholes need to be tied up that have allowed and enabled these people to do what they've done. And for us, it's about change on so many different fronts on top of holding these people accountable. Hopefully, through the lawsuit, some of these people will never be in a position of authority over children again.
If people want to We'll have a link to the statement of claim in our show notes. The tortuous conduct, as in tort law, starts on page 13, and it's a 32-page document. So it goes into pretty explicit detail of all the abuses that are alleged. Give it a read. It is really hard to read. Be careful if you do.
Going through a process like this can be really re-traumatizing. But have you also found people are starting to feel like a little bit less lost because they're taking this sort of action? And
yeah, for sure. I think, initially when the news came out, the people that didn't know that the news was coming out, it was very re-traumatizing for them to hear about it, because a lot of people had just kind of buried it and left it there. But now that we're a couple months down the road, a lot of people, some of the comments that have been made is just how freeing it is to have that information out now, because it's been something that we just haven't talked about and we've just been quiet about it. But it, and for myself, I can speak to that because there's people I've had in my life for like 15 years that I've never talked to about this. And when they've asked me questions, it's like, oh yeah, I went to school in Saskatoon. Like, that's about it. There's people who have like lied about where they've gone to school and, just to not be associated with that place. It is part of the process. And one of the positives though, through this, people who have come forward criminally, through Ministry of Justice, this is the first time some people have been able to access counseling because of the cost and lack of benefits. And that has been so beneficial for a lot of people to actually, for the first time be able to address these things in a professional way. And a lot of people have said it's like having this like hidden secret that you don't talk about. And then now that it's out, it's like, okay, it's okay to, like, you can kind of let that part be of your life instead of trying to keep burying it.
Have you guys seen any accountability so far in terms of people losing jobs, people being brought out of the shadows and into the spotlight, and any sort of accountability in that regard, or maybe a government taking some action on things to respond to the allegations and your experiences?
Sure. When we went public to the media with our story, one of the things that had happened was they put in administrators in the 3 schools. So there's the school I attended, and then a school in Prince Albert that our former principal runs, and then Grace Academy here in Saskatoon that the former director was fired from Christian Center, and then he went and opened his own school. The government pulled Grace's certificate because he would not comply with an administrator. He would not cooperate at all. Apparently, he had quite a big flip out when the administrator was there and kind of manifested himself. So there was that. So that was a real positive for us, because that was the big part of why I wanted to come forward publicly before charges, because that is one individual that I would categorize as my main abuser. And knowing that he was running a school just made me feel sick. That school should have never been open from day one. That's the other, issue with this current government. It didn't even meet the regulations to be open to begin with. And they received public funds from day one of opening.
That's stupid.
It is. So that happened. So Grace Academy, one of 3 is shut down. The only 3 actually certified teachers that were named, they were signed an agreement with the STPRB, which is the regulatory board for teachers. So they weren't investigated yet, but they just signed an agreement saying that they weren't going to teach basically while this is going on. But had the government not did their overnight change in legislation that they did after the article came out, those people could have just kept teaching. So very scary.
At least there has been some action thus far.
There has been, yeah, a little bit. But again, the file is sitting with the Crown Prosecution Office. They've seen the things we're alleging. The police have seen things we're alleging. Had we not come forward publicly and just waited for charges, John Olababoken would still be operating his school.
Mm-hmm.
And in May of this year, Minister Duncan announced that he was increasing funding to these schools.
And then he took his fucking sweet time getting those administrators and even doing anything.
Did.
A joke.
So there's still, there's definitely been some progress, but there's a lot to go. And it's really hard when you're talking about people that are around children and in that position of authority. I've had former students of Grace who have reached out to me and told me their stories of things. And there was 2 teachers that said, hey, who were at Grace in 2015 and 2017. 2 different teachers made criminal complaints to the Saskatoon police about that individual. And the superintendent of the Ministry of Education was aware, and because complaints went to him as well. And the 2 teachers provided emails of these complaints that they'd made, and nothing was done. There was no even proof of a discussion that happened between the superintendent and that person.
Yeah, there's such a long way to go. Like, it's nice that this is being addressed in some way, but like, it has to be bittersweet because it took a giant groundswell of attention and lawyers and media in order to make this important enough to address, because when it was just individual people coming out, there wasn't enough attention for things to be done. So like, in an ideal world, something wrong is done, it's reported, then it's mitigated. But like, it took a giant groundswell of attention in order to get this to address anything. So it seems nice, but bittersweet it must be.
It is, because it's hard to look back and see how little this school was regulated. And just how easy the government just was like, here's a check, we'll write you a check, but wouldn't regulate these places. And when you look at the Teachers Regulatory Board and you go through there, and they have cases on there where teachers have had their license suspended and they've gone through processes there. You go through and read those, and then you compare them to the things that have gone on at this school, and it's just totally blows your mind. And the other problem too is that when these schools are allowed to operate without certified teachers. Yeah. So they only have to have 1 certified teacher per 50 students. So there was, majority of the time when I was there wasn't actual educated teacher teaching me.
It was just a person.
Same with my sister when she was there. When you're not a registered teacher, you're not under a regulatory board. So technically the government then is supposed to be the regulatory board. That would be who's above them.
Mm-hmm.
But they haven't regulated this school in a long time. And there's definitely an argument to be made that changes they've made in 2012, 2018 have enabled these schools to continue flying under the radar, because they've almost made it this perfect storm of, you can do whatever the heck you want and we'll give you the money for it.
Could you imagine any other profession? Like, as long as we have 1 paramedic for 15 ambulances, we're fine.
As long as there's 1 pharmacist who's got a license, we can dispense drugs.
1 real doctor for 100 patients, that'll be good.
Round white Tylenol? Yeah, sure, give it to him. It's fine.
But I mean, that's sort of the way conservatives are trying to push things. Whenever they talk about self-regulation and, cutting red tape, like, this is the kind of shit that's going to allow if they get their way whenever they talk like that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And like they tried with the meat industry until a bunch of people started getting poisoned. Like, it was... That's that whole self-regulation mentality.
And they think that they make the argument that if the market is open and there's no regulation, that the best product will rise to the top. But like, buildings fall down a lot in countries without building regulations, because people will take shortcuts and do abuses if they can, if regulations aren't in place to address that shit.
Absolutely.
I'd love to leave the episode on a lighter note, but there's been some developments since we recorded on November 5th. 5 days after Kate recorded with us, her security cameras were ripped down, her house was vandalized, and a reference to scripture was spray painted on her house. Hebrews 12. Therefore, since we are receiving a kingdom which cannot be shaken, let us have grace, by which we may serve God acceptably with reverence and godly fear, for our God is a consuming fire. Would you like to guess what happened next? Fearing for her safety, because she had the impression that somebody was targeting her home, she fled with her 8 children elsewhere. And the next day, November 11th, her house burned. Now, I'd hate to imply things before proper investigation is made, but even the lawyer representing Caitlin says that it's clear that someone probably did this. When you have a quote that says an all-consuming fire, and then a house that's burned down, combined with a threatening letter sometime before, the puzzle pieces seem to fall together. This is what happens when victims come forward. This is why more victims don't come forward. If someone from the church did this to stop her, it means that the reward she gets for pursuing justice for herself and fellow students around her is to have her children's lives threatened and her house burnt down.
Caitlin Erickson says the vandalism to her house started last Thursday. Someone ripped down her security cameras and spray painted a scripture verse. Erickson says she took the message as a threat.
Our God is a consuming fire, I think is what the scripture verse is. So, yeah, it's obviously concerning, and having somebody weaponize scripture is pretty... I think it's scary when people weaponize scripture. Okay.
Erickson says she'd seen this verse before. In August, someone sent her a threatening email.
It said, Caitlin, it would be advisable for you to stop talking to the press if you value your life. Hebrews 12:29.
Erickson reported the scripture graffiti to the RCMP and left home, returning the next day to feed her dogs. Once inside, she heard someone upstairs.
Oh, I panicked. Like, it was immediate. Like, I froze with fear. And I had my 15-year-old nephew with me. So it was like making that decision. Do we, like, is this person going to come out and attack us, or do we run? So we ran out of the house.
Erickson reported the intruder to the RCMP. Later that night, another officer called with more bad news.
He just said, I don't know how to tell you this. There's been a fire at your house. And I said, no, I think you have the wrong person. I called about the break and enter. And he was like, no, is this your address? You have 2 dogs? I was like, yes. And he's like, no, there's been a fire.
CBC is not reporting the location of the home.
You don't know what's starting.
But there is a video that shows extensive damage inside. Her belongings are melted and some of her pets died, although her 2 dogs, Yoshi and Georgia, survived.
If that's what their intention was to scare me into silence, that's not happening.
So as you heard in that news report, a large portion of Caitlin and her children's belongings were lost in this fire. If you would like to help her recover, she has a GoFundMe page up right now. GoFundMe.com/F/Caitlin, CAITLIN -and-her-children. Or you can just look up Caitlin and her children -house fire GoFundMe. If you Google that or search that, you should be able to find it. And a link to that GoFundMe will also be in the show notes. Please contribute if you can. I think she deserves a Merry Christmas, don't you think?
I think that's a good place for us to end. Kate, you're a fucking hero. Thank you so much for coming on the show.
Thank you for having me.
Of course.
If you are listening to this and think you might be part of that class, in our show notes we'll have a link to the law firm. Fill out their form, send it in. It's going to be rough. Do that.
Yeah, and people who are filling in the intake, don't worry about, spending days and weeks on it. Just try and get the basics in to the intake, and then you can, re-add to your intake as you go. But just so we have your information so we can keep updating, as the process goes.
Also, as a nice fuck you to Mile 2 Legacy Christian Academy. The intake does ask if you are Mr., Mrs., Ms., Miss, Mix, or let me type something, and also lets you be gender identified as male, female, non-binary, transgender, intersex, let me type, or I prefer not to say, because I'm sure they'll love that.
Okay, folks, for Occultae Veritatis podcast, my name is Leon Filger, along with
Sage Murray,
Ood Gallifrey,
Richard Bigley,
the soundboard demon,
and joining us in studio,
Kate Erickson. Thanks for having me.
Ellie B.
And Don Kessler.
Good night.
Love you, bye.
At this point in the episode, we've been going for 3+ hours about all the events in the story and the abuses and the allegations and all that. So let's talk about some fucking X-Men.
Yeah. I'm down.
So welcome to the X-Men tourney. There are wrong answers. Rules are simple. I will give you 2 X-Men. You decide who's better. I have not defined better at all. Better is entirely up to you.
So we can choose our own definitions for better.
Yeah.
Okay.
Finally, there are 10 X-Men, and I'm not going to break it down much more because one of them is Magneto, because is he an X-Men? Is he a villain? They're the main cast of the 1992-1997 X-Men animated series. And it's going to be corny as fuck because you won't see it because you're listening to a podcast, but it's a slideshow, and it's corny as fuck. So, our first matchup, and this was all randomly generated, is Wolverine and Magneto.
Well, if they're I forget, is adamantium magnetic?
Yes.
So Magneto can like paralyze him, right?
There's a whole episode where he like actually pulls the adamantium off his bones. Yeah.
I know it hurt a lot going in. It had to hurt coming out, too.
That's what she said.
I feel like that was one of the Hugh Jackman movie ones, too, where Magneto shows up and just like, oh, metal bones.
Yeah.
If we're talking about them fighting, I think Magneto's got the win. I think by the time he gets the yellow suit, like his bone claw days are long behind him, I think.
Oh, yeah, I'm pretty sure he starts with metal claws at the start of the
Yeah, he does.
90s series.
I don't know. This one's a tough one. I'm going to go with Magneto.
I do really like Magneto's helmet. I think I'm going to go with that.
I also agree because Magneto is my favorite. That's pretty much it. He's the best because he's my favorite. Our next matchup, so Magneto wins that one easily. Our next matchup, Beast and Storm.
Oh, that's hands down Storm.
And why? Why is Storm hands
She's a
down?
literal goddess. Like,
very fair.
In all the versions of Beast that I've seen, he seems nerfed. Like, he seems like...
He's evolved again, so...
Is he stronger in the comics? Can he act? Because he seems like the guy who gets his ass kicked in the movies.
He's just kind of thick and smart, right? Like he's just a himbo, but not a bow. Smart. What's a smart himbo? I guess just a person who goes to the gym.
I don't know. I don't know enough internet slang.
He was already strong and had athleticism, but he had like super big, long feet and hands.
I gotta go with Storm because I've read very little comics, but I've read a lot of wiki pages, and I know she can do like worldwide weather bullshit, and like she can like it's not even just lightning strikes. She can call in like hurricanes and shit.
Yeah, she can literally affect the weather, and she can actually create like an air bubble around her face too, so she can actually fly in space.
Oh,
yeah,
that's awesome.
Yeah, better than a big blue himbo.
Yeah.
That brings us to match number 3, and this one had someone who I didn't know existed. It is Jean Grey and Jubilee.
Oh dear.
What is Jubilee's power? Because all I see is she shoots sparks out of her fingers.
Yeah, I mean...
They're basically fireworks.
So she has fireworks.
But no, she actually is one of the mutants that loses her powers.
Yeah?
So she can't have fireworks anymore.
Not anymore.
She has to go down to the store like everyone else.
Yeah, actually, and she ends up getting captured by Dracula's son because Blade is a part of the Marvel Universe. So now she's a recovering vampire who has a mutant adopted son.
And has she gotten her fireworks back?
No. She's a half, basically, defanged vampire.
Oh, next time a birthday cake needs a sparkler, they will have to go without. Is the Phoenix Force, is that like a cosmic entity that enters her?
Yes.
The life force of the entire universe
But also the
personified?
destruction of the universe. It's the creator and destroyer of worlds.
That's a lot for one human body.
Thus Phoenix.
That's a hands down. Jean Grey or depowered pretend vampire.
Yeah, like I want to like Jubilee, but they kind of I don't know. Jean Grey's much more compelling.
It sounds like it's Jean Grey then. Phoenix. Let's go to match 4. It is Cyclops and Professor X in his giant yellow wheelchair hover car.
I don't know, but between these two,
Charles Xavier. He's like my favorite. So
speed of light versus the speed of psychic. I think Charles can shut him down before he can shoot him.
Also, I have like a connection with this too because like I grew up watching like Star Trek: The Next Generation, and I also grew up loving X-Men. And I said, if they ever made an X-Men movie, it would be so cool if Patrick Stewart played Charles Xavier. So then when I see this, right, it's literally the only thing in my entire life that I've ever predicted, and it happened. And so I was just like, ooh. So
I want to point out, I do have predictions all the way up to the finals of this challenge, and so far I've been correct on all of them. I'm also a Professor X stan. Cyclops is just too vanilla.
he's very vanilla and very strict and rigid with himself. Basically, probably just because he knows he always has to keep himself in check to make sure he doesn't hurt anybody with the fact that he can never turn his powers off. But he's kind of he's vanilla.
Okay, let's go on to round 5, which I think I have all the pictures ready already. Yes, Rogue and Magneto.
I read a storyline, but they were actually like secret lovers, so I'm kind of torn between this one.
Isn't Magneto like 50 years Rogue senior?
Yeah, but he kind of lost his powers too, so he went through cosmic sources to re-get his powers, and he ended up like rejuvenating himself. So he still kind of looks oldish, but I think it's more like a daddy thing.
Silver Fox as opposed to you're 80.
No offense, Ian McKellen, but Ian McKellen.
In a fight, I think Magneto would come out on top. Unless, I don't know how powerful, like, fully awakened Rogue is, but I think that Magneto could probably even supply her with a fight. Yeah.
So, to this question, Rogue or Magneto?
Magneto. Yeah.
That brings us to match number 6, which is Gambit and Storm. Gambit throws cards and has a stick.
This is a tough one.
He's gonna lose, but I love Gambit.
I don't know. The thing is, though, he takes potential energy and he turns it into kinetic energy. That's what his power is.
Yeah.
He just happens to like having his throwing cards because he's a Southern gentleman and also a master thief. We are looking technically at the 90s TV show versions. Yeah. Because also, like, he is actually sometimes something will trigger him and you actually see his skin go black and his hair goes white. And when he plays his Death Apocalypse Horseman stuff, and then he's even more powerful and messed up and stuff. But
Ultra Instinct Gambit.
Yeah. I'm going to have to say Storm.
Yeah. She can hit him with a lightning bolt from miles away. I think she's got
Boosh his cards away.
Yeah.
Match number 7, we have Magneto and Jean Grey. Sash Phoenix.
Jean Grey. She's an Omega level telepath. Also has the Phoenix Force. Also has telekinesis.
Yeah.
I would just squish his stupid little helmet around his skull.
Yeah, because Charles' problem is he can't crack the helmet, but she can just pop it right off.
Or just pop it.
Oh.
Yeah.
Because Professor X is a telepath, but not telekinetic.
Correct.
Yeah, your squishing can argument is compelling. I think Jean Grey's got it. I mean, what's he gonna do?
Okay, Jean Grey or Magneto?
Coy's argument that like she could just squish his head inside that helmet. Like, I don't know what else he could huck a bridge at her, and she would just be like, nah. So I think Jean's got it.
That brings us to match number 8, Storm and Professor X.
Yeah, love Storm, but I think Charles has it. I think he can. I mean,
she actually has natural defense against telekinetic or telepathic attacks.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Is that from her? You mentioned that she was a goddess. Is that from her goddess shit?
She's a goddess, but it's because she's like literally a force of nature, basically, right?
Yeah, that's fair.
Is Storm.
Yeah, I mean, if she has a resistance to it, all she would need is like Charles to try something, it not to work, and that just little bit of hesitation would be all the chance she needs, I think.
Lightning bolt to the hover chair.
Oh.
So it sounds like Coy's with Storm.
That's hard because he's like one of my favorites. Yeah, I have to say Storm.
Good.
Yeah, I didn't know she had a resistance. So I think he might be able to eventually overcome that if he, like, I don't know, turns it up to 11, but I don't think he starts at 11. Especially with, like, one of the X-Men he's like, a little attached to. I think if she went rogue and evil and he had that moment of hesitation after his first telekinetic shit didn't work, I think she'd be able to fry him.
That brings us to, a very nice matchup for third place. We have Professor X and none other than his childhood friend, Magneto.
Oh. So, has Charles ever been able to overcome the helmet?
They have overcome each other many times.
Have they come over each other any times?
You know what? It was the 60s, so who knows?
Now, remember too, this is the match for third place, so whoever loses this is not a top line. So who is the better mutant, Professor X or Magneto?
Charles, like, leans on his subordinates more heavily? Like, he relies on the X-Men more heavily?
But so does Magneto with his Brotherhood of Evil Mutants.
Yeah. They're both formidable. They both know how to hurt each other from over the years.
I'm going to go with Charles on this one just for my own personal bias.
My favorite X-Men of these 10 is Magneto, so I'm going with Magneto for my personal bias. Ood, you're the tiebreaker.
Magneto always seems to be on the back foot. I think I'm going to go with Magneto because I like him more.
Which brings us to our last match, Jean Grey and Storm.
Oh, shit.
First and second place, Jean Grey and Storm.
This is a Titan battle.
Well, even in the first iteration of when Jean Grey first becomes the Phoenix, it is Storm that actually goes head-to-head with her, and Storm almost kicks her ass.
Oh, really?
As Phoenix. So that's tough.
Fuck. I mean, you have one mutant human versus somebody that contains, like, the life and death of the universe. Like, if Storm gave her a good fight, that's pretty good for just a mutant human.
Yeah, I know. This is a tough one.
Like,
it's weird looking at her as the 90s Jean Grey, though, because that is not my favorite.
I think I want to go with Storm. I'm not even sure why. Like, I know Jean, even vanilla Jean without the Phoenix Force is formidable, especially when she gets more training and shit like that.
And, like, Storm is always powerful, isn't she? Like, first episodes is like, she flies in, there's a huge thunderstorm, she's like, fuck off, it goes away, and like, hi, I'm Storm.
What happens to a toad when it gets struck by lightning?
Yeah. So, the question at hand. Jean Grey or Storm?
I think my vote's for Storm.
I have to vote for Jean Grey.
Oh, shit.
Oh, that makes me the tiebreaker.
It does.
Which means that Storm is our number one and Jean Grey is number two.
There we go.
This did not go quite as I had planned, but I am glad that it went this way.
Yeah.
I won't bother changing them because I don't actually care, so we're going to go through real quick. In third place, we had Magneto. In second place, losing very closely to Storm, is Jean Grey.
Oh.
Who is also Professor X.
She looks so different.
Yeah. And finally, in first place, we have Storm. Thank you very much for playing this weird after show and talking about some X-Men with us and schooling us greatly on our lack of knowledge.
Yeah, I was pulling from, like, ancient memories of animated shows past. Yeah, I think I'm going to dive into more of those comics now that you're talking about them, actually.
They're super good.
Thank you for coming. I know that relitigating all these past traumatic memories can't be easy.
Well, I appreciate you guys reaching out to me and stuff, and hopefully between Caitlin and myself and the other stuff you guys have put together, this will be, letting more people know.